Hello, good morning. Welcome to The Big Issue. The Big Issue is live on 97.3 City FM. We are live and interactive on our WhatsApp line 0204447033 or 0549986996. I am Selorm Adonoo. This morning, a number of things we have before you. The President, John Dramani Mahama, has begun forming his government, and quite a number of names have been put out as nominations. Some have been vetted. Earlier in the week, we saw the vetting of his first three nominees, the Minister Designate for Finance, Energy, and the position of the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. We'll look at some of the matters that have arisen from the vetting of these three issues of taxes, issues of the public tribunal that the NDC wants to set up, issues of how the energy sector will have to be dealt with. Should we privatize the sector? And all of that. The minorities raise issues with the vetting and how the chairman of the committee, the appointments committee, is been conducting himself. They feel that he's acting as a bully. Do you agree? The NDC itself has said that is not true. He's just doing what he has to do, and that it is the minority side that is being unruly. We will look at some of the issues that they, especially first-time MPs on the minority side, have raised in respect of the conduct of the chairman of the committee, the Honorable Bernard Ahiafo. We will also look at the subject of privatizing ECG. There's been a PricewaterhouseCoopers report on ECG generally. The report, quite damning, says that the ECG is flouting the rules, or is flouting the arrangement of the cash water for cash, the CWM, which is a system put in place by players to equitably distribute cash that comes to the ECG amongst the distributors and even the generators, the cash waterfall mechanism. So we will look at that and see whether the cause for the privatization of the ECG is in place or not. POO, which is the workers' union of the sector, said they are not in favor of the privatization. They rather want government to invest into the sector. We've seen PDS, we've seen quite a number of other attempts to privatize the sector, and it hasn't worked well. What is the way forward now? John Mahama and his team appear to be very certain that privatization is the way to go. What do you think? What would that mean for the current inefficiency of the ECG? What would that mean for the indebtedness of the sector? We'll look at all of that this morning. Also, Oral, the Operation Recover All Loot, which is a proposal or a manifesto program or proposition by the NDC. They are in power now. And even before the president took office, he set up a team led by the Honorable Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, which is to, according to the communication, collate information from the public before the government itself was properly installed. That was before January 7. The government has been installed now. President Mahama is the leader of Ghana. What is left of the mandate of that committee? The minority in parliament has also raised issues about the legality of that group. It says that that group has no legal mandate and it must not be doing what it's doing. Indeed, they have cautioned former appointees of the Etwa government not to honor any invitation by the oral committee. But is the oral committee really inviting people to appear before it? We'll delve into all of that and understand all of that this morning. I'll take a short break. I'll return, provide you some updates, introduce my guests, and we'll get a discussion underway. Once again, my name is Selorm Adonoo. This is The Big Issue. You are welcome.
Get ready for a day of gratitude and nostalgia at the Swesco Annual All-Year Group's Thanksgiving and Remembrance Service. Join us on Sunday, January 19th, 2025 at the ICGC Christ Temple, Aboseokai in Accra at 2 p.m. The service will also mark the launch of the 66th anniversary celebrations of Swesco. Wear your Swesco cloth and be part of this special gathering. Contact your year group president for further details. Let's make this a day to remember. See you there.
Hello, you're welcome back. This is The Big Issue, live on 97.3 City FM. We are also live on our socials and, of course, on Channel 1 television. Show is live and interactive. You can join us via our WhatsApp line, 020-444-7033, 020-444-7033. And that's been displayed on your screen. Also, on 0549-986-996, and we'll be happy to share your views with the rest of the world. There are three key issues we are looking at this morning. President Mahama forms his government. We'll look at the nominations. We'll look at the vetting process. We'll look at the matters arising. Key nominations have been made for finance, for energy, for the Attorney General's department, for education, for roads, and quite a number of other areas. About 13 regional ministers have been named, and he appears to be balancing that quite carefully. About 7 women have been appointed or nominated in all, and a number of other issues that will come up. But even before the vetting starts properly, of course, one has been done, or 3 persons have been done in one session. The minority on the appointments committee has been raising issues. They think the chairman of the committee is being a bully. The chairman talks down at them and then shouts at them. They think the chairman is not conducting the affairs of the committee well. We'll look at all of that and see other matters that are arising. In that vetting committee hearing, we got a confirmation that some taxes will be scrapped. We also got confirmation on the fact that the NDC may want to revisit the issue of the public tribunals, and also that the government is very, very interested in privatizing the ECG. These are key matters we are dealing with this morning. I want to know what your take on those matters are. So like I said, ECG privatization, whether that's the best way to resolve the inefficiency that sector is currently experiencing. We've seen the PwC report that has been quite damning of the ECG. Will privatization solve that? Of course, we saw the PDS and we saw other attempts to privatize that distributors' work. We'll look at the oral in focus. The oral is the Operation Recover All Loot, a manifesto promised by the NDC. The minority is directing its members and former government appointees not to honor invitations of the committee, because they say the committee has no legal mandate. The NDC argues that the president had legal or has executive power. But the argument really is, at the time the committee was set up, did the president now, John Mahama, have legal or executive power in accordance with Article 58 of the Constitution? He was just president-elect. He was not president of the Republic. Could he have set up a committee to be doing the work it is doing? That is the gravamen of the argument we'll be looking at this morning. My guests for today, Dr. Yao Graham is the coordinator of the Third World Network, Kofi Asare, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch, the Honorable Edem Agbana, MP for Ketu North, the Honorable Chunibua Kodua Foko, MP for Mansun Kwanta, and a former MD for the National Investment Bank, and Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa. These are my guests this morning. Later on in the show, we'll have Martin Pebu join us for the oral discussion. Now, let me go straight to Zoom and speak to Dr. Yao Graham, who is coordinator of the Third World Network. He'll spend some time with us this morning, and then we can come back to the studio and then deal with the matters in studio. Hello, Doc. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you and to all your listeners and viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning. I mean, just to start off, you've seen the list of nominees the president has made, list described as interesting. First of all, what is your general impression on this list? Which names stand out for you?
Well, I mean, it's less the names that stand out and more really the institutions and ministries that the people would head. And really, until they start work, we will not be able to establish their competencies. Mm-hmm. I have seen some comments about, the backgrounds that people bring and so on and so forth. What I found interesting is that we have elected people to the highest offices of the land, without a lot of discussion about the competencies that they bring. I'm not talking only about this election, but in previous elections. And we've had ministers who came out of obscurity and were very kind of effective. And the law really is that any citizen is fit for office if they are literate and so on. So hopefully with the program that the NDC claims it's about to implement, these fellows will be able to deliver. And I think the appointment of a few women, a few more women into the lineup, it's encouraging. Of course, there are people in this lineup who we know from their previous roles in government or in opposition. A few of the things that strike me with the ministerial appointments have to do with the fact that someone like Dominic Ayene has been proposed as Attorney General. He was previously Deputy Attorney General. He has a long history as a public interest lawyer. I had the experience of working with him when he was head of the Center for Public Interest Law. And so I have expectations that there are important issues around the administration of justice. Particularly interesting for me is the fact that we don't have any meaningful legal aid regime in this country. And a lot of poor people cannot access legal services because the fees charged by the bar are beyond most people. So that's one area of reform that I hope that he can bring about. The other issues that we can return to around the regional tribunals and so on that he spoke about. So the Minister of Finance, I think we know in the crisis that we have with the economy, that's an extremely important position. Mr. Forson, Dr. Forson has been involved in this exercise as a former Deputy Minister of Finance and also a leader of the opposition. I note also the appointment of Haruna Idrisu as Minister of Education. I mean, that's an extremely important area given all the controversies about the free SHS and really what it has highlighted about just the need for much more broad-ranging discussion about the education sector, strategy on education, the interrelationships of the various levels, and also the fundamental question of the financing of education. The free SHS, the fact that the MPP hyped it in its campaign, but also heavily shows that the questions people are beginning to raise about the quality and not of the idea, but also the lived experience of the SHS means that this is a very important ministry. Energy, it's a very big one. It's been looming over us. The cumulative effects of various appointments, various policies, from the PNDC to the NDC to the Kufuor time and all the way now to where we are has accumulated a number of problems. And I know that the government has put to the fore the privatization of ECG, something which I think it's not the approach, but we can discuss that in detail. But the energy sector issue is a big issue, and a group of CSOs that Third Network Africa is part issued an open letter to the president, and the reform of the energy sector is one of the key areas that we highlighted in our letter to the president. So there are a lot of issues there. In addition, I would like to note that the government has also appointed a number of people to natural resource sector management institutions, the Mineral Income Investment Fund, Petroleum Commission, previous Minerals Marketing Company, GMPC, and so on. A very important sector of the economy. We've made some appointments there with some mandates. And I think, for me, those are some of the noteworthy things that they put out. And curiously for me also was the idea that the PMMC boss is going to lead the creation of the Ghana Gold Board. Which would be accountable to the Ministry of Finance, but also would be in charge of small-scale mining as per the NDC manifesto. So there are a whole range of things there which are worthy of note for me.
Very well. That's quite interesting. Let's begin from finance. A key manifesto promise has been the scrapping of some taxes, key amongst them being the e-levy. We've had the COVID levy as well, emissions tax, betting tax, and all of that. many have said that we are in the middle of an IMF program. We need revenue. And that scrapping those taxes now will deny the state or the government of money to implement the ambitious policies or programs they put before the people of Ghana that made it secure the huge mandate it did. What are your thoughts generally about the government's pledge? And we saw Atuforsen emphatically repeating same at the vetting committee that he is going to champion the scrapping of those taxes. What should be the approach? You think the taxes should be scrapped as he has said, or you think it should hasten slowly? If it will be scrapped, what should be the approach? It talks about increasing compliance, but what's your view on all of that?
I mean, first of all, as taxes, of course, they have the same seemingly equal legal and economic status. But taxes, the thing to impose the tax is driven by various rationale. So the fact that they are a source of revenue, while that's an element of it, does not explain why the taxes are imposed. So I think there are different reasons for the different taxes. And looking at them as a revenue source is one of the ways to look at it. So we can break them down. E-levy attracted a lot of public anger, and people felt that it's an indirect tax, and it's largely going to be paid by people who use Momo a lot, which likely is going to be lower income people who don't have bank accounts and therefore do a lot of transactions with Momo. So it's an example of a tax which may bring revenue to the government, but in terms of its equity, can be described as a regressive tax. Because we have a situation where alongside this, for example, in the late Mahama period, the government reformed the royalty regime for mining companies, which has ended up losing the country quite a bit of revenue. In a moment where gold prices are at an all-time high now, that measure, basically has been a measure which has privileged the rich. We criticized this when it was done. So I'm making the point that not all taxes are the same. So the e-levy, in terms of its social impact, who pays? There's a case to be made for its scrapping. The COVID levy, COVID is long gone. So really, there's no reason to maintain that. Now, the emissions tax, the law we set up that they talk about it's a tax on carbon dioxide emissions and trying to raise money to promote a green economy. Now, in the period of climate change and global warming, governments need to take measures to try to promote a green economy. There are questions to be asked about whether the mechanism for the effective administration of that tax exists, and so on and so forth. So what I'm arguing here is that if you look at each of those taxes, they are different in their character and their purpose and their effects, socioeconomic effects. So the emissions tax, I will not add to, because you can't describe it as a nuisance tax in this period. The betting, the tax on betting. Betting has become very pervasive because young people don't have work, and a lot of time is being spent by young people betting. In other countries, taxes on betting have been used to discourage betting because betting is addictive and also is socially disruptive. So if you say removing the levy on betting, it's basically a statement that you are okay with betting. So what appears to be a tax measure actually is a major socioeconomic statement by the government. All of them are grouped together as taxes. But what I'm trying to show here is that you can't simply group them as taxes and say they are sources of revenue or, and so on and so forth. I mean, the need to diversify the sources of taxation so that they are more equitable, they are more progressive and less retrograde and less burdensome. We have got a heavy presence of indirect taxes in our tax portfolio, which basically consumption taxes, which burden poorer people, and they are regressive. So there's a bigger question about if the NDC really has its claim to be social democratic, a social democratic government should be looking at reform of fiscal and tax regimes which actually are equitable. And that goes beyond simply, what you do with one or two levies and taxes.
Great. Talking about betting taxes, you said it's to discourage the betting because it could be addictive, etc. And so that is a socioeconomic statement from the NDC. What will be the alternative if these are to be scrapped? For example, ISE, the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, says that in all, these taxes bring in some 5 billion cedis. And it says that scrapping this should be nuanced in a way that will balance public relief with fiscal discipline. What should be the approach? The finance minister appears to be saying that in his first budget, he is going to fulfill this manifesto promise. Now, elections have been won. Of course, we see a lot of things before winning elections. What should be the approach? You think it should be nuanced, as ISA is suggesting, to balance the public relief with fiscal discipline, or he should just go ahead and deal with it as he has promised, or they promised in the manifesto?
I mean, if they take a decision to, I think the e-levy is definitely the biggest source of in that 5 billion that is talking about.
It's actually COVID levy that brings in or brought in 3.17
the COVID
billion.
levy, I think really there's no justification for a COVID levy in 2025. Absolutely none. And there are taxes that, historically governments have imposed, which have been abolished, and they have to find other ways, of levying, We've had malaria for a long time. We don't have a malaria tax in this country.
I see. Now let's deal with the issue of the ECG privatization. I note the position of Third World Network and all of that. But given the inefficiencies that government has said occurs at ECG, which indeed is the case, about 40% loss is commercial technical, and given that we've tried privatizing before, it didn't work, etc., what should be the approach? Government says it doesn't have money to keep investing. They have obsolete equipment. Something has to happen. And they think that privatizing the sector is the best way around it. What's the suggestion from you?
The primary reason for the state of ECG is the accumulation of different political decisions and activities. Successive governments and public institutions do not pay ECG what is owed to ECG. So public debt over time has eroded ECG's capacity. So that's one. If the governments had been, if public sector had been paying for electricity consumption over time, a major contributor to the ECG's economic problems would not have got there. I remember in 2015 when this discussion started, I did an article where I made the point that the money that Ghana was expecting from the Millennium Challenge for operation in exchange for the privatization regime was less than the amount of money owed to ECG at that time by the government. So that if the government actually had been paying ECG, it would have had that income and over time. Because if you don't have the income, of course, you cannot even maintain your equipment, you cannot expand your services and so on. In recent times, the terms of the agreements with independent power producers has also become a factor in ECG's problems. So, for example, with the collapse, in addition to that, with the collapse of the exchange rate, ECG pays the IPPs from its revenue. Revenues are collected in cedis and
paid
then
in dollars.
Paid in dollars. Tariffs have not kept pace with the collapse in the exchange rate. So part of ECG's economic problems have to do with a mismanagement of the economy and its knock-on consequences for ECG. So if they used to spend, let's say, 7 cedis on $1, and they are now spending 15, it's double. And tariffs have not kept pace with that collapse in the exchange rate. And we also know that the agreements that have been signed with IPPs have not been terribly advantageous for this country. So again, when we issued our open letter to the government, the network of CSOs on extractives and anti-corruption, energy sector reform, broadly put, was one of the things that we raised. Now, finally, if you look at the terms in which privatization has been discussed, the government undertook that any private operator of ECG, government will ensure that consumption by public entities are paid for on time. And also guarantees were given in one of the earlier phases, and this would remain to any concessionaire, that they'll have a guaranteed rate of return on their investment. When this was first put out, the ECG management noted that if they too were guaranteed those terms, they'll run an efficient and profitable organization. And some of the more egregious things going on in ECG, the number of meters in the system, is a result of every political regime and its functionaries looking for a procurement opportunity to make money. Now, this is not so we need to look at this. But ultimately, whether you keep something as a public entity or not so first of all, there are the reasons for the problem, which have nothing to do with the ownership model, but more with how various policies and management issues have affected it. Because we have many entities in this country which people feel are very inefficient, they are fed up, but we are not talking about privatizing them. And given the strategic importance of ECG in this country, we privatized Ghana Telecom, and we ended up with one private monopoly. And really, the role that telecom could play in our national development has diminished. A lot of those things are not getting enough. So we need to go back to the reasons for why ECG is in crisis. Because really, given, for example, the public unhappiness with the judiciary, should we privatize it? Given the public unhappiness with the police, should we privatize it? So purpose and function, as well as the factors driving the problems of the organization, need to be taken into account. And we have never been convinced about the justification for the ECG privatization. Unfortunately, President Mahama, when he was in office, set in motion this exercise. He signed that agreement with the MCC, rushed a thing through Parliament before he went to the US on a visit, and then began to rush this. And really, I would have hoped that, given what has happened in the intervening period, when they came back to office, they would take advantage of the time for reflection and the blunders that took place leading up to PDS to try and change direction.
I see. I mean, the public sector is accumulates huge debt with ECG, or a lot of the ECG debt is from the public sector. Is it not the case that over the years we failed to get government to pay its debt, and so bringing a private person in there could be bold enough to tell government in the face that you need to pay your debt. If you don't pay, we take you off. Like we saw the young man, the big Mahama, tried to do. He had a lot of issues and problems doing that. But if a private person comes in, or the private sector comes in, don't you think it will make it easier and more compelling for government to pay its debt on time, and that will help ECG get more money to do its work?
That's a curious and actually very sad argument. Because these same politicians and government officials negotiate private contracts which are beneficial to themselves and quickly bring the payment of those things to the front of the queue. All the procurement scandals and things which people have spoken about, people have been quick to make sure that their private interests are met. Again, in the statement that the CSOs put out, they listed a number of contracts that need to be looked at. If you look at Mahama's own first 120-day social contract, there's a list of procurement issues and contracts which they want to look at. If people can be so self-serving, why can't they put the public interest to the fore? So to argue that public entities will pay for what they consume only if it is owed to private people, but they cannot be relied upon to pay public entities,
Great. Now let's quickly deal with the issue of the justice sector. The NDC's promise to bring back the tribunals. Many have wondered why they want to bring in the tribunals. Of course, it's still in our constitution. Page 142 of its manifesto says that they will support the Chief Justice to establish the regional tribunals provided for under Article 142 of the Constitution and pass a law to reintroduce the community and circuit tribunals first established under the Courts Act, etc., etc. What will the public tribunals do that the current courts are not doing? But I think that's even a secondary question. First of all, you think that bringing back the regional tribunals, etc., is the way to go in dealing with the many corruption matters we have in our society? That's the first question.
I mean, I think we should be careful here in how we formulate the discussion about the tribunals. The tribunals are one of the courts provided for in the Constitution. They can be set up. The regional tribunal basically is at the level of the High Court, and then there are community tribunals, which can be specialist tribunals. The key feature which is different from the courts as we have them now is that there will be lay people on the panel of the tribunal. So it is not, the discussion of the thing has been in terms of it's a throwback to a certain thing. I think that is an exaggeration because it will be part of the court system under the leadership of the Chief Justice, as all the courts are. They will not be standing outside the structure of the courts as the tribunals were in the times of military regimes. So really we are talking about two differences, the nomenclature and also the composition of court. There was a time when we had lay magistrates actually sitting alone at the lower levels of justice in this country. They were not lawyers. The Constitution provides for the regional tribunal chair to be somebody who is qualified to be appointed as a High Court judge. And so we have to start with the fact that it's provided for in the Constitution. And therefore, and it's also to be part of the court system. So if they are going to be set up, they have to fulfill the terms of the Constitution and also the act governing the courts and so on and so forth. And the CJ's remit actually to set up and manage those courts. And the innovation will be the participation ordinary people. But there are places in the world, where at the lower levels, like in the US and so on, people are elected. So there's a variety of experience about judicial structure and composition. I can understand people's worry about the history of public tribunals and the sense of arbitrariness and its use as a political instrument. But if those lessons are there, they ought to be applied in how the constitutional provisions about tribunals are operationalized, so that the idea of ordinary people being involved at the lower levels in the administration of justice as something that the Constitution has promised is operationalized in a way that it strengthens public trust in the judiciary. In addition, it's important to note that actually this step will not necessarily improve public confidence in the judiciary, because these tribunals could just become as troublesome, as worrisome as the courts that we have. So there are standing issues about the public trust in the judiciary, which need to be addressed. There are major issues about the criminal justice system, which I would hope that the new Attorney General and the NDC government, will pay attention to, in addition to whatever they are planning to do with the regional tribunals, because there are huge issues of just the poor quality of justice in this country, which will not be resolved by the creation of regional tribunals.
Very well. So the question then is, what at all is it that the current system is not doing that the regional tribunals or that the tribunals will do? Of course, you mentioned the fact that it introduces the factor of laymen dispensing justice into the equation and all of that. Also, from the past, we know that they were not really in for the legal technicalities, etc. Admissibility of evidence and all of that are legal and they are technical. And they must be followed for someone to have a fair trial. But if there are lay people on the committee and who may not have appreciable knowledge about these technicalities, which are important in dispensing justice, would that in the end not be counterproductive?
I think I would. I mean, I don't remember the rationale in the discussions of the Constitutional Committee and the Constituent Assembly when they were passing this thing. But the concerns that you raise, these are fears, legitimate fears, which I suspect informed why also the idea of the tribunals has been formulated not simply as something outside the court system, but these will be part of the court system. So all the things they are raising about, rules of procedure, admissibility of evidence, and so on and so forth. I mean, at the moment, with all due respect, you are speculating. But your speculation is to say certain things ought not to happen. And I think you are right. And if these structures are to be set up by the Chief Justice as part of the court system, as provided for in the Constitution, the idea about the tribunal is not an NDC innovation. This thing is sitting in the Constitution. When I read the statement put up by the NPP, they didn't raise any legal or constitutional problems. They raised political fears based on history. That's very legitimate. But these structures are not tribunals as were set up by military government. The name may be the same, but what is being intended substantively are not something chaired by, some lay person who is a political appointee and so on. If they are set up, they will be part of the court structure under the Chief Justice. So the things being raised ought to be part of the vigilance that people have when these come to be established. Unless we amend the Constitution and remove these structures are legitimate part of the Constitution with the same, status as any other, thing that the Constitution aims to provide. I mean, there's a concern about it without many, but the key thing is that these will be part of the court system. And the fears that you are expressing, we ought to be alert to be sure that the Chief Justice and the others in setting up learn the lesson to avoid that we are building a system which is innovative and also strengthens confidence in the judicial system, but also avoids some of the experiences that people do not want to see repeated.
Very well. Thanks so much. But before you go, I'm curious to know, given that you are a center of left person and all the discussion around free SHS, what's your thinking? What should be the approach? The Minister Designate, Honorable Haruna Idrisu, has a huge task before him to review and rework that process. Of course, the government has pledged to convene a stakeholder forum, etc., to look at the issues. But what generally will be your word on it, given how it is now and the financial difficulties it's having, the fact that people think that it's not being targeted, it's just wholesale and everybody's benefiting, which should not be the case. What generally, briefly, should be the approach?
I think the idea of free basic and secondary education, it's a good idea. But it involves costs. The MPP launched this thing as a gimmick in a certain perverse way, almost like when in the anti-colonial struggle, the UGCC said independence in the shortest possible time. The CVP said independence now, self-government now, and trumped the MPP, the UGCC. We have had a reverse of this. The NDC said would introduce free SHS over a period, and the MPP said we'll do it now. And very little thought went into it. And the government, throughout the Akufo-Addo government, basically did not give the public full information, intimidated people who had criticism, who were inside the system, and so on and so forth. Huge problems have accumulated in the free SHS. And it's not only what has accumulated in the free SHS, but there's a knock-on consequence. If you have free SHS and you are spending so much on it, you are producing a large number of people who now have to enter the tertiary education system. You have to plan for that. You also then have to make sure that the access to basic education is available for all your age group. What we are seeing is that increasingly, even poor people are sending their kids to private schools at the basic education level because the quality of public sector schools is very poor. And it's not only in the villages, but even in places like Accra. So the free SHS thing has put at the center of the discussion, the larger question. So I think the idea about a discussion about it, it's important. One of the things I've always worried about, and I know this is controversial, I don't know anywhere in the world that free education has been provided as boarding education. Because for the unit cost of each boarder, you can put several day school people through the same education. So even the education model around with the SHS, it's one of the things which has got to be put in the wash on the medium, long-term basis, not a near-term basis. But immediately, what we have in front of us is a free SHS scheme, which is in crisis, which is producing a lot of not very well-educated kids who are knocking on the door of tertiary education, for which there's not enough investment going in, and so on and so forth. So the national dialogue really will be a moment for all these things to be put in the wash. But the model as it is not sustainable, either in terms of its output, in terms of quality, and also its cost. So a big discussion and revision will be required.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yao Graham. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. Dr. Yao Graham is a coordinator of the Third World Network, and he spoke to us on an array of issues this morning. Now, let me revert to the studio now. Kofi Asare is here, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. Edem Agbana, MP, Honorable, first time Honorable appearing on the program. Let me say he's my hometown MP, so congrats again. MP for Ketu North, and Franklin Kujo, President Imani Africa. Cheneboa Kodua Foko, Honorable, MP for Manson Kwanta, first time MP as well, and former MD for the National Investment Bank. Gentlemen, once again, you're welcome to the program. I start off with you, Kofi. Interesting names we've seen. Let's start off with the vetting, nomination and all that, nomination vetting and all of that. Interesting names we've seen. We've seen Arthur Forson, formerly deputy, now given the main job. We've seen Ayeni, formerly deputy, given the main job. And then Jinapo as well, same thing. Now we've had a number of other people, Haruna Idrisu, we've had a few other people whose names have come up as nominees of the president, awaiting vetting, etc. Your general thoughts about the quality of people we are having and the task before them?
Well, I think the quality is good, and I must indicate that the quality has always been good when it comes to the qualifications and the backgrounds of persons appointed to be ministers in this country. And so as usual, we are having a rich profile members of the NDC being nominated for ministerial consideration. We see a blend between those who have been ministers before and then also first-timers. And then it is also worthy of mention that the squad looks much more youthful. We are seeing more young people being given an opportunity to become ministers directly without becoming deputy ministers ahead of becoming ministers. And so it's promising, and we hope that the experience and then the academic credentials we are seeing translate into real action. As I keep saying, having keenly observed governance issues in this country for a while, I've come to the conclusion that a good minister is not a CV. It's not the academics or the experience. A good minister is about discretion, it's about good conscience, it's about attitude. These three things. If you
Good conscience.
if you are very
Let's take a listen.
good conscience, discretion,
Discretion,
and attitude.
attitude. Okay.
In Ghana, the issue is not about competence. It's not about being academically qualified or being professionally qualified or experienced. It has never been the case. We've always had it. But then the application of the experience and the academic background, academic qualification, the application of these two on the job, is where the issues have been. And in all the issues, you realize that where we've had leadership deficits, by at various ministries, they are always a function of bad conscience, indiscretion, and negative attitudes. And you know what attitude means, because as a leader, the attitude you exude, in leadership, to a large extent, communicates to the citizenry, those you are serving. Servant leadership has been very, very scarce in this country. People become ministers, and then overnight they become tin gods, and they become monarchs of all this survey. So attitude is key. Being a servant leader, a good listener, and then also having good discretion, and then a good conscience. So for me, we can only hope and wish all the nominees the best of luck, and expect that they will rise beyond the qualifications. They are very, very qualified, very, very qualified. So they must make it count in these three areas, and then bring their leadership to bear in solving the challenges that the people expect them to solve.
So when we look at the vetting, for example, key issues that came out, so finance, scrapping the taxes, increasing the base for tax collection or compliance. Energy, we have privatization of the ECG, which was a key issue. And a lot of the issues that came were power sector related because of the so-called looming doomsaw scare, or the doomsaw matters we are having to deal with, which greeted the new administration. So it was quite natural that power sector would dominate the vetting. And then in the justice delivery sector, we saw issues of the establishment or the reintroduction of the tribunal system, into our, criminal justice system. What's your thinking generally? Which ones stood out for you, or which ones are you interested in commenting on now? The taxes, which obviously will bring some relief to us, will be happy. But what will be the consequence of that on the economy generally, and all of that? Expectation is high.
I mean, citizens' expectations are high in respect of the tax cuts that were promised. Yes, the NDC was very sure in its mind that these tax cuts would mean revenue cuts, if innovative tax reforms were not undertaken to while reducing the tax burden, increase, the volume of taxes. Bearing in mind that it is coming in office with a big manifesto and a lot of promises. And so, but the citizens want to see, they want to have the reliefs. Whether it costs 5 billion or 6 billion, the citizens want the relief. So it is important for the balancing to be done very well. What do I mean by the balancing? The first is that while you are initiating tax reforms, the first thing you have to do is to cut down on expenditure to meet the shortfall. The thorny issue is that for some of these taxes, they are more or less part of the IMF memorandum of the government. E-levy is in there. So once you are taking off e-levy in the budget, it means that you have to provide revenue assurance, the equivalent of what e-levy is, from about 2.5 billion or so a year in the budget. So yes, there's some tax re-engineering to be done, but for me, those promises must be kept. Promises to the people, especially those relating to taxes, must be kept sacred, must be held sacred. And then let's focus on how we can cut down expenditure to atone for the loss, and then undertake the tax reforms proposed by the NDC, if they are done well, they should have a positive impact on revenue generation. Those that have to do with the IMF, I'm sure the discussions have started now. We met the IMF last week to have discussions about the future of the program after the IMF had met government. And so I know government has already initiated discussions with the IMF. They are back in town maybe next week or so to start discussions with the government on the budget, which should be done in March. And so we know that discussions around tax reforms and then what it means for the IMF program, etc., are already ongoing. And so for me, I'm interested in the tax cut. But everybody also is interested in the energy sector because energy is a driver of economic development, energy and transportation. Without energy and transport, there cannot be development. There cannot be economic development. So we are all interested in what happens within the energy space. We are informed that there's been an extension of the scheduled maintenance regime by another 2 weeks. Hope that the 2 weeks will provide enough time for the new minister to get in emergency fuel supply so that we can power the barges with liquid fuel as the maintenance goes on, so that we can have our lights on. The big discussion is what Dr. Yao Graham was having. In the medium to long term, what do we do with the energy sector? Because the losses are there. We can't continue to spend close to 30 billion every year to take care of inefficiencies. I mean, why someone doesn't pay their bill, and then taxes that are supposed to be used to finance education and health eventually it ends up being used to atone for someone not paying their bill just to keep our light on. It is obviously not sustainable because we need money to build schools, we need money to build hospitals, and we need money to provide healthcare. So whatever, for me, I am not ideologically opposed to privatization. Yeah, I don't have any ideological positions on that. I think we are in an era where what works must be allowed to work. That's what I would say. What works must be allowed to work.
For example, Dr. Graham makes the point that a lot of the issues affecting the ECG now are not the creation, some are not the creation of the ECG. So, for example, the IPPs, we have agreements with them, and we pay them in dollars.
Yeah, but there's nothing you can do about that.
There's nothing you can do about that.
Okay.
So,
and the other issues are governance issues.
Yeah, so government, for example, not paying
when will the political architecture change? Let's ask ourselves. Do we see it changing? You understand? So I am a realist. The issues he raised are real. Political interference in the governance of SOEs, including ECG and all that, yes. But that starts from the Constitution and our mindset, our political culture, putting cronies on boards and then supporting politically convenient decisions than economically expedient ones, right? So that's the culture. It's not changing. We don't see it changing. It's been so since 1992 or even before. But we need our light on. And we can't continue to spend about 30 billion a year to atone for losses. Such funds should have been used to eliminate the 5,000 schools under trees. We have millions of children who are learning without desks. But we are spending money to pay for the electricity bills of people who are not paying because of inefficiencies in the distribution and in the collection of revenues. So what are the proven best approaches in revenue collection? If it includes privatizing an aspect of the value chain, okay, and not the entire value chain, it should be considered. For me, what works is what must be considered. We need people who are owing the government, who are owing ECG to pay. So what model works best? But the current model we are running, obviously, is not efficient because we can't continue, to pour water in a basket the way we have been doing. For me, privatization has failed and has succeeded. You understand? The bigger question is, will the approach we are likely to adopt succeed? What is the best practice in other African countries? And then we see the way to go. It's about the approach. It's not just about privatization, but it's about the approach and how the approach, to a higher extent, secures the interests of the poor, to a higher extent, secures the public interest, and also provides, efficiency assurances, revenue efficiency assurances. That for me should be the focus of the discussion, not entrenched positions about being against or being in support of privatization. It's about what the privatization itself means. What is it? What's the approach, and how does it provide all these assurances so that we have our light on?
Great. All right, Adam, welcome again. This is your government.
Yes.
Quite some names coming up. Of course, you say the names are good and the names are very competent. So let's take the issues as they've come. Three people vetted so far. Issues of tax scrapping, turning the economy around. Arthur Forson says he will bring back, or he will bring the inflation rate back to single digits, stabilize the exchange rate and all of that. These are key issues. He's promising to do all of that. Privatization of the ECG, others don't appear to think it is the way to go, but Mahama and the minister and the government generally think that is the way to go. AG's comments, tribunal, etc. Just tackle them for me bit by bit so that we make progress.
Right, so
And the scrapping of the taxes, is this something that must be done now, given that we don't even have the full picture yet? You go scrap taxes, which total about 5 billion cedis to the economy. What is the alternative?
Well, Selorm, good morning to you and to my brother Kofi and all our cherished viewers and listeners across the world, especially to the good people of Ketu North. Let me use your platform to once again extend my sincere appreciations to them for their overwhelming mandate given me on the 7th of December. And thank you for having me. Selorm, quite some interesting developments with regards to the appointment so far. But clearly, I, as a member of the National Democratic Congress, I am excited that President John Dramani Mahama has started on a very good note. And indeed, even by the appointments made so far, it is clear that these 4 years that he has is clearly his legacy term. And it is time for serious business. And he has proven that as president, he is prepared for the job. And so we have started on a very good note. So far, we've made 12 sector ministerial appointments, and out of the 12, 3 are women. That represents about 25% so far. Don't forget, he made a key promise of ensuring that we have at least 30% of his cabinet being women. And for the fact that we have, for the first time, the first female vice president of the Republic, and the president again has shown commitment to empowering women, including women at the highest decision-making body, which is cabinet, and having 25% so far. And I know some more appointments will be made by Monday, and many more women will be included. That must also be commended. And in the past, usually women are appointed to some ministries that people do not really see as such big or such, for want of a better word, important ministries. But for now, you have the likes of Honorable Elizabeth Ofosu-Ejari heading to trade, agribusiness and industry. Very big ministry. And it shows the commitment of the president to give women a seat at the table, and we are really grateful for that. Again, there are also issues of regional representation. So far, apart from about 4 regions that are yet to get representation, which we know for a fact that on Monday, when the next badge of ministers list is released.
On your list now is the additional nominees.
Yeah, so these are the additional.
So he mentioned, Adam mentioned Elizabeth Ofosu-Ejari. It's the last on the list there.
Trade, yes.
Trade, agribusiness.
You have Ablajifa Gumashi for tourism, culture and creative arts, and a well-deserving appointment. We all know her commitment to the industry. She has been an industry person for several decades. She was deputy minister in the last President Mahama administration, and today she has been promoted to be the substantive minister. You have the likes of Eriko Poku one of our leading voices on agriculture. I think that appointments like that of Eric Opoku, the Honorable Eric Opoku, everyone was expecting it. We all know his in-depth knowledge about the agriculture sector. He has been our voice, issues of cocoa and all of that. The likes of Kwame Agboja and all that. I think that President Mahama has shown that indeed this term, the opportunity given him by the people of Ghana is an opportunity to serve, and he has made the right appointments. Then we move to issues of youth. During the campaign, President Mahama promised to appoint or constitute the youngest cabinet ever. And he is looking at, by youngest cabinet, we are looking at average age of about 45. Clearly, with the appointments made so far, we are even doing way below the 45, which is a very good indication. He made a key promise to the young people of Ghana to create a ministry for youth development and empowerment. In the past, we had a situation where we had Ministry of Youth and Sports, and all the focus, much more of the resources allocated to that ministry was spent on the sports aspect or the sports sector. Even with sports, complaints among the stakeholders, including myself, was the fact that all the focus was on football. Even with football, you can go further to criticize that much more focus was placed on only the Black Stars. Because we have situations where even the female national team, the junior teams, were not even getting the needed resources. President Mahama, by this appointment and by the creation of this ministry, has sent a clear signal that issues of young people, that the youth of Ghana must be given a platform, must be given a ministry that thinks about them and creates solutions to the challenges that young people face. And I think that one of the people who has led the advocacy for the creation of this ministry, who has provided leadership to the NDC in the youth wing, George Opariado, my former boss at the youth wing, is the best person for the job at this time. And I'm happy he has accepted to serve in that role. And so clearly when you look at the appointment made so far,
and he is a gentleman on your screen now.
Yes,
George
so
Opariado,
I was his deputy
he's a lawyer.
Between 2018 and 2022 as deputy national youth organizer. He was elected national youth organizer. We re-elected him again in 2022, and so he's serving his second term as the national youth organizer. A gentleman so passionate about young people and about empowering the youth. And I am excited that President Mahama has given him the opportunity to serve as the first ever minister for youth development and empowerment. Again, when you look at the appointment from the political point perspective, you also can see clearly that none of the names mentioned so far are strangers, in quotes, to the NDC and to the Ghanaian politics. In the past, we've had situations where when a new government is sworn into office, we have people parading themselves on the corridors of power with all sorts of qualifications, like what Kofi said, that we used to work in the diaspora, we've worked here and there and all of that. And some of these people are brought on board, and at the end of the day, their performance does not reflect the hype around their CVs and qualifications. But in these appointments, you have individuals who live right here with us, deeply involved in the politics of the day, are connected to the grassroots, not only of the party, but to the ordinary Ghanaian like myself, people who are accessible, who are affable, people who understand clearly the challenges of the day, being given the opportunity to manage these ministries. I will be very surprised if any of these ministers does not perform or live up to expectation, because looking at their background, their involvement in their campaign, their connection to the grassroots, their connection to the ordinary Ghanaian, and the engagement so far, I am confident that this team that President Mahama has put together is the best team to reset Ghana as he has promised. One of the ministers appointed so far that for me strikes some more excitement within me is the Ministry of Education, the Honorable Haruna Idrisu. In the last campaign, we can't deny the fact that education was the biggest topic aside the economy in the campaign. All the conversations around. The NPP were propagating that President Mahama and the NDC will come and cancel free SHS. They made all the arguments about how the educational sector has improved. And we also believe that the NPP has messed up the educational sector and there was a need for resetting for us to come and change things in the sector. When you look at the Honorable Haruna Idrisu, his trajectory, his involvement in leadership right from his student days, he's one politician that you can describe as a tough politician, very principled, and there's no tax too big for him. And so, as a leader, when you are making appointments, it is important to give the hardest tax to the people you believe
can do the job.
Can do the job without fail.
Yes.
And I am excited that the Honorable Haruna Idrisu, given the opportunity as Minister for Education, can reform the educational sector. And I read the write-up from Kofi earlier, and that tells you, look, if you know and you get close to the likes of the Honorable Haruna Idrisu, a people-centered leader and a leader that always strives, so determined to bring everybody on board. It is important to say that right from the basic level to the tertiary level, there is a lot of work to be done within our educational sector. Personally, one of the things I am looking forward to in this government in the next 4 years is for the minister to lead the agenda to bridge the gap between rural education and urban education. I am MP for a constituency that can be considered as a very rural constituency. When you go to some of the communities, facilities, educational facilities, basically non-existent. And so you expect a child learning at Gbegbekope Basic School to compete with a child from the very big schools here in Accra, the Morning Star and all the others. Selorm, the gap is so huge that right from the word go, that
child is disadvantaged.
That child is disadvantaged.
So,
I mean, it is important to get a minister who will be committed to bridge the gap, ensure that the free SHS is improved and better implemented, ensure that our promise to provide that no fee stress or support for school fee support for first years admitted to various tertiary institutions, all these policies must be implemented.
Great.
And
Haruna is a man to do that.
I believe that there is no better person to do that at this time than the Honorable Haruna Idrisu.
Yes, let me quickly introduce Honorable Chunibo Akodia Foko, MP for Mansun Kwanta, former MD for the NIB. Great to have you. Welcome to the program. So I wanted you to quickly deal with me, for me, the matter of the scrapping of the taxes. That came up mainly. So just use some 2 minutes to deal with that, whether it is the right thing to do now or it should be nuanced like the Ise talked about. Agwana?
Yes.
Yes. So I wanted you to deal with the issue of the taxes for me.
With the taxes?
Yeah, just in a minute.
With the taxes in a minute.
Then I go to Franklin and come back.
Selorm, I think it's important for politicians to court trust, public trust. We made a promise to scrap these taxes.
Even if it would disturb the economy.
So even before moving into whether or not it will disturb the economy, I believe that at the time the promise was made, the members of the NDC's economic team knew the implications of scrapping this tax. And so I'm happy that at the vetting, the Honorable Finance Minister designate, our former leader in the House, or our leader currently in the House, made that commitment that with his first budget, some of these taxes will be scrapped. It is important for us to scrap them. Again, Selorm, I think that our problem as a country is not so much about revenue generation. It is about how the revenue generated is managed. There is so much wastage in the system. And so it is not even about increasing revenue generation with all of these taxes, but it's about the little you collect. How well are you spending it to the benefit of the Ghanaian people? You have a country where it is reported that annually about 12 billion is lost to corruption, lost to wastage. You have a country where it is reported that almost every contract is overpriced, is overinflated. And so these are the challenges that we should be focused on addressing. And I am happy that as we scrap all these taxes, increase efficiency by ensuring that people given the public purse to manage must account for every peso.
Very well.
And I'm happy that even with the e-levy, the betting tax, the emissions tax, COVID tax, and all the tax that we mentioned in our campaign, we will live up to expectation by scrapping them. The 5 billion, as the finance minister designate said, will not harm the economy if they are scrapped. But the future is for us to start thinking about how well to bring in revenue, to increase revenue without necessarily placing a burden on the already overburdened Ghanaian. And so these are the key issues that we should be taking. I am happy as a Ghanaian that the government made a promise and we are not backtracking on that promise, and we are committed to scrapping the tax with some of these taxes in our first budget.
Very well. Great. Franklin Kujo, good morning again. Welcome to the program. It's been a while, but I'm happy you've joined us today. Whilst you are away, appointments were made. Vetting has been done for some, and nominations were made, and new nominations have been made. Quick thoughts on these, and deal with me mainly at this time on Ato forcing. Hello, Franklin.
Oh dear.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
All right. Okay. If it is better, then I can continue.
Yes, go ahead.
So good morning. Good morning to yourself and my friends in the studio. By and large, I think the appointments so far are okay. I think they are excellent. Don't forget some of the people nominated actually had served before. So there's an issue of experience and what have you. Well, you asked me to speak specifically to the economy, and I suspect that of Ato. Obviously, Ato's appointment, Ato's nomination is an excellent one. I think the gentleman has honed his skills. He's served within that capacity for a while. In that capacity for a while, and then also he's mastered the art really. I mean, he mentioned the fact that Tekpa is his godfather, and beyond that, I think some of us have engaged him professionally not too long ago, and our conclusions were that he's mastered and is ready for the job. I think the vetting was okay. He showed that he was a master of his own. He exuded confidence. He knew the economy inside out. He understood the complexities we are dealing with as a country, and essentially what to do to come out of the doldrums or our fortunes that seem to have been dwarfed right now. So. By and large, I think generally he did well. I was a little bit worried when two questions that Honorable Appeño, even though Appeño went round and winding. I actually think Appeño Martin as, if not the most important, probably the most important of the questions of the day. And the two of them specifically, I don't know if you caught those questions, but they were central to the NDC's economic what I call the engine room, because the NDC promises that they want to build a 24-hour economy, which essentially would increase growth, right? And then the other one had to do with the 10 billion infrastructure fund. And Appeño's questions were simple. Well, first of all, the president nominated you because he believes strongly that you are the gentleman who really would help tend the fortunes of this country, if not at all salvage the what I call the race to hell that the Nana Addo government was taking us to, and so somehow stop it, the hemorrhaging and all of that. So having said that, what can you walk us through essentially what the 24-hour economy? Have you done some modeling? Were you part of the modeling process? Presumably, if you were part of the modeling process, then somehow you're able to tell us how the arrangement would be, where funding would come from, which sectors of the economy would be effectively, should I call it, propelled and then which other sectors will be sacrificed? Because seriously speaking, that's the way I would answer. I would actually deal with that matter. It was not a classroom. It was not an exam question. So I've heard people say, "Oh, it's not an exam question where you need to come and show what was modeled." No. But it's a crucial question. You see, the reason why it's crucial is that it forms the basis of the NDC's economic, should I call it, turnaround. So if you are not able to give some semblance of understanding, I'm not saying he doesn't understand. I mean, he chose not to deal with it the way he did. But I think that as finance minister designate, having gone through all the problems we are going through, and for international people who are listening, I would think that it's a semblance of some telling us exactly what has been modeled. Okay, so we think these sectors, for instance, the IT sector. I mean, if I were to answer the question, I would have thought that I've said, okay, in the IT sector, for instance, we see opportunity. We can scale because we've met a number of IT companies that are providing services for even East Asian companies and other companies around the world 24/7. Last week, I was in one company like that, and I saw the operations. I was happy. So we can engineer that with a number of, should I call it, incentives, and then make sure that we scale this. And right now, I know that sector is giving us maybe probably 1 billion Ghana cedis. With some re-engineering by a factor of 3 or 2, without necessarily doing anything. We're just promising them that, okay, we'll take care of some of the taxes that you pay to the government. In terms of maybe, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of taxes that you pay to the government, maybe we'll give you a little reprieve so that the business can employ more people. You have just changed the face of that business, multiplied probably by a factor of 3, and you have increased revenue. You've also employed more people. That's not the sort of modeling I was expecting to hear from my good friend Adonoo. At least, because if you were really part of the 24-hour service discussion, it should be easy to answer that question. And I thought that I didn't get details on that.
I think what he said was Guzitano, who is a president's man on the ground, is the one who is leading it, and at an appropriate time that will be presented before Parliament.
No, I disagree. You know why I disagree?
You thought it was an opportunity for him to let us know what that policy contained.
Oh yes, and I'm saying that the question was about modeling. You know what? Clearly speaking, you must have done a bit of modeling, and as I say, I suspect he had his own reasons, probably not to get into the details, but I mean, it was an opportunity for him to demonstrate that, look, if we did ABCD, we can raise revenue without necessarily taxing people, because that's the mantra he used throughout the whole article, which is a brilliant idea, but he never really gave us any examples of how exactly he's going to raise revenue without increasing taxes. And I'm telling you, if I were asked that example of the IT sector, which provides a lot of services across the globe for some companies, and then engineer that way, then you get revenue at the same time increase employment and economy.
Very well.
I didn't get that point. But the other point I need to make quickly was that, in fact, if you told that Gustavo would be frankly, it didn't come up well for me at all. But that's fine. The other points had to do with the 10 billion fund. And again, a very beautiful question that people probably did not pay much attention. He asked the question that, okay, one of your flagship projects, one of your clarion call is to establish a $10 billion infrastructure fund. Granted that you are still preaching that you use a sinking fund method, which is a brilliant idea, by the way, because Pepper did that sinking fund thing. It was a wonderful thing. It helps save some of the problems that we have, and provided cover for a rainy day. Of course, the NPP came and did all that they could, took away all the money and did all sort of silly stuff. Anyway, so sinking fund, plus the fact that you also want to cap borrowing, because you don't want to borrow more. So listen to your question carefully. You want to raise 10 billion for some sort of infrastructure fund, but at the same time, you are saying that you want to provide sinking fund for cover for a rainy day without necessarily going to increase borrowing. Brilliant economic questions for graduate students. I would have thought that the best thing my good friend Adonoo said was, in fact, Okay, listen. In fact, I think Peña went ahead and asked, how exactly are you going to raise that money? Tell us, will you raise $1 billion in 1 year, second year, third year, fourth year? Or exactly what arrangements do you want to have? You know, that question to me, plus the 24-hour economy, constituted the engine room question about the economy. And I thought that was a fine opportunity that was missed.
Great.
Having said that, I think obviously, as I said, was in his own class. It was a bit classless in terms of the things he said. And I think that given the opportunity, he definitely would excel.
Great.
The other ones, obviously, I think they also did well by the Attorney General and the General Board.
Very well. Very well. Good. Nice one. Thanks so much, Franklin. The Honorable Chunibua Kodua Foko, good morning. Welcome to the program. I know your interest will heavily rest on outsourcing, and there were other issues the minority raised that we'll come to later. But give me your quick impression about outsourcing, and we'll deal with the vetting issues proper, you know.
All right, thank you so much. Firstly, I extend my greetings to the people listening and watching, especially my own constituency, Manson Kwanta. I'm sure they are watching attentively, so I extend my greetings to them. On outsourcing, if you ask me to give a general impression, I would say it will be limited, and based on the exposure I've had with him, which basically was at a vetting committee, basically. And if you permit me, I'll just be brief on my assessments at the vetting committee. So, yeah, we asked him a few questions. I had the opportunity to ask him a few questions. One of them was about his determination to abolish some taxes, which we acknowledge. And of course, I'm sure a lot of people will be happy when you say you are abolishing some taxes. But then the question that comes immediately from some of us is, yes, you are abolishing taxes. We know the nation is challenged in terms of revenue. Currently, revenue to GDP is just about 13.8%, very tight, and we have debt to service. So if you're abolishing COVID levy, if you're abolishing emissions tax, if you're abolishing e-levy, if you're abolishing betting tax, mind you, e-levy alone this year is projected to earn us about 3.96 billion Ghana cedis to support this 3.8% revenue to GDP. So if you're abolishing these taxes, what is your plan? How are you going to replace these revenue losses or shortages? And the response that we got was not convincing enough. He said he was going to make some cuts
And
in
improve
the
compliance.
system to create space. But you and I know that there's a limit to how much you can cut. I mean, if you want to run an economy, if you want, even in your own business, what is the best way to have cash flow to run your business? It is not about just cutting. There's a limit to how much you can cut. I mean, in my own business that I ran, NIB, where I was the managing director, I mean, to bring efficiency, we made some redundancies and all that, but there's a limit to how much you can go. So you need to create the revenue, you need to create the wealth to run government machinery. So he couldn't give us the response. We asked him, if you're cutting all these out of the government revenue, what would you replace with? He couldn't give a specific response. He kept on saying he will cut. But then if you look at the space, if you're going to cut, then one would ask, we know the structure of the economy. Is it some of the great programs by the NPP, like the free SHS, that you are going to demonize, package somewhere, and cut to create the space? Or is it the ongoing infrastructural works, like for health, for road, for other infrastructural works that you are going to cut to create a space? Is it allowances to nurses that you are going to suspend, or what? Where are you going to cut? You should be able to tell us right away that this is what you are going to do. Same issue of revenue cuts. We asked the same question about the first year tertiary students, that the promise was made that their fees was going to be paid. You need revenue, and in reality you need cash flow, actually going beyond just revenue, because there's accruals. So what cash flow are you going to use to make good of this promise of paying the fees of first year tertiary students? That one, we couldn't get the response that we expected. His response was that he wasn't the finance minister yet. But then we asked ourselves, when the promise was made, or before the promise was made, were all these calcs not done before the promise was made? Why should you become the finance minister before you would know if you can pay the fees for the first year's tertiary students? Mind you, KNUST, they are already in school. So you promise them, those that are in school, those that are at home waiting for you to pay for them to join.
But to be fair, his government really is not in place yet. He doesn't even have an education minister. So students may go to school, but he doesn't have what it takes now to pay the fees of the first years. So maybe that promise will be more realistically assessed at the next academic year when his government is in place. He doesn't have, he only nominated his education minister, 2 days ago.
I get you, but what I'm saying is to say that you can't give a response until you are the minister. When the promise was made, definitely you must have had some calcs based on which you made a promise. Similar question was asked on the fact that a promise was made to include private SHS to the free SHS program. His response was, the private SHS, do they write WASI? And that was, really surprising. Do they write WASI? So when the promise was being made, we didn't do any assessment to check if private SHS, they write WASI or not.
I think what he was trying to say, the question was whether schools like Lincoln and GIS, etc., were also going to be part of the private schools to be on that program.
Yeah, but you should be able to be forthright.
So I think because obviously we know Lincoln doesn't write BC.
No, I get it. There are always exceptions. But
so I'm sure he said
us.
So. I thought it was just an answer he gave. That of course you should know that.
No, I'm coming. What I'm saying is, before you make any promise, you must have done your research and be sure that you could deliver. When Nana Addo said he was going to make SHS free, he had done his calculations. The moment he came to power,
not entirely. Did you listen to Nana Addo's interview in 2008 with Stephen Saka of the BBC? He hadn't done any costing, and he was caught flat-footed. So it's not true that he knew exactly how. 2016, maybe because he had said it for maybe about 8-10 years. Obviously, you could see some things were in place. But when the promise was made in 2008, in that BBC interview, he was completely not sure what he was saying.
No, thank you. Ideas never come fully 100% formed. We are human, okay, but once the idea comes, you have the conviction, you start working towards it.
Great.
But you don't come to a vetting committee where you are on the verge of being confirmed to tell us that I'm not a minister yet, so I can't give certain responses.
Great.
That is my problem.
I get
So for me, on the question of abolishment of tax, I say yes, it's acknowledged, and I'm sure a lot of people will welcome it. But then we need to be convinced as to how you will replace this in the meager income or revenue that a country has. Being, 13.8%, he did indicate he wants to actually increase it to 20%. If you're going to abolish some taxes and still increasing it to 20%, then you should tell us.
Great. You know what? I want you to hold your thoughts. Kofi will have to run. I want to take his thoughts on some things, and then later I'll have more time for you. Okay. All right. So Kofi, I know you have to run, and your time is fast spent. Deal with me on the education thing. We've seen the nomination of Haruna Idrisu, a fantastic politician, but we've not really known him as a guy in the education space. What does he bring to the table, and what will be the issues you want him to prioritize in this very vast sector?
Well, We all know Haruna to be 2 decades or so MP, former student leader, former employment minister, communications, etc. And he is a person with a great personality. I would expect that once you're an MP and have been there for some time, you should be a good lobbyist. I mean, you must be a good advocate to remain in Parliament for that long. So, and he comes across as an affable person. You know, yeah. I have not worked with him before, but I've seen him work from afar. One is the fact that expectation from him, and then also I'm putting the two together. Since 2006, it has been on our books to implement a 20% allowance for teachers who teach in deprived areas. Since 2006. It found its way into the conditions of service of teachers along the line. It has never been implemented. And this has been in various political party manifestos, including 2 of NDC's past manifestos. Discussions we had when we met with the now president, when he was developing this manifesto in the Ghana We Want consultative meetings, give us an indication that he wanted to nail it once and for all and implement that particular proposal. We have long made that recommendation. So, seeing that promise in the NDC manifesto, and this being a typical collective bargaining issue, I mean, it's a conditional service issue. It's part of the employment issues of the teacher. I want to see him use the experience that he has gathered working with teacher unions at the Ministry of Employment, prioritizing implementing a 20% rural teachers allowance. That would be a legacy for teachers. Because as I mentioned, it's taken about 20 years, or about 20 years of agitations and recommendations and counter-recommendations and long processes of various committees. We want that thing to come to an end with this particular promise in the NDC manifesto. So he should be one of the best people to see this through, having been Minister of Employment in the past. Apart from that, the second thing is that, yes, I agree that, I mean, this is a sovereign republic, a unitary state, but we have run the country in such a way that we have created a generational gap between rural and urban, and it permeates in the education service delivery quality, and also permeates in the education outcome quality. The gap between education attainment for a child in Greater Accra region compared to a child in the Northern region is about 20 percentage points. BC. Everything is defined in terms of rural urban divide, even textbooks availability. Desk availability. There are districts in the Northern region with about up to 80% of students not having access to desks. If you go to Central Gunja, they have the highest level of teacher deficits. About 80% of teachers in kindergarten are not available. While in the districts in Greater Accra and in the metropolitan areas in Greater Kumasi and other areas, you know, you find an overpopulation of teachers. So we have, in a way, implemented education policy in a manner that has succeeded in rather widening inequality, rather than using education as an instrument to re-engineer society and bridge the gap. He is the first minister from the north, and I have worked with. I started working with the ministry as consultant in 2005, but I saw Harry Sawyer and then Gabra when I was a student, and this is the first minister we are having from the northern region. And from these, the most deprived regions in education are the 5 northern regions, Western North and then OT. At least, I believe that we can see much more decisive action on the equity angle, ensuring that education resources are distributed in a manner to bring the rural schools at par with urban schools, and not in the straitjacket manner we've seen for decades, which is responsible for the rural-urban divide, the sharp rural-urban divide in basic education access, quality, and also learning outcomes. So these are two things that I think I want to see him or in a better position to develop. The third is the issue of infrastructure, related to the second, infrastructure. You hear 5,400 schools under trees. About 80% of them are in the 5 northern regions, OT and Western North. You hear 1 million school desks needed.
Those same areas.
About 80% of them are in the same areas. So when it comes to, and the remaining 20 are also in other deprived rural areas across the country, in the Volta region, or in the central region especially.
Even rural Greater Accra.
Yes. So we want to see a much more pro-rural affirmative action driven education policy. That will not just do a straight jacket and say that, okay, at the national level, the dropout rate is only about 30%. No. It will also consider the fact that in some parts of the country, only 2 out of 10 children who attend kindergarten are able to complete junior high school and go to senior high school. We must be equitable distribution of resources should be key on this agenda. And then our senior high school reform.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah. The NDC is clear in this manifesto about the things it wants to do to free senior high school. There are 3 big tickets. The first is that they want to end double track. The second is that they want to add private senior high school students to the free senior high school policy. And the third is that they want to decentralize the feeding. There are other small, but these are the big ticket ones. So I want to see Haruna approach these 3 things in a very meticulous manner. Double track has enabled 1.4 million children to be in school at various times. About a third of students are always home. As we speak, 2 batches are in school, 1 batch is home. Ending it means phasing it out. It must be a phased out approach, a gradualist approach, so that we don't deny any of the 1.4 million children or more an opportunity of secondary education. But the plan to end it is the vision to end it is good because it is not a good, it's actually not a policy. It's actually the outcome of, poor planning. So it's actually a challenge that we are managing. And so it must be managed in a way that we don't unduly deny access. That is one. Private schools involvement too is another thing we must carefully look at. There are 2 ways. The NDC intends to use the private schools as part of its double track ending agenda because many of the private senior high schools are empty because of the free public free senior high school. And so it's seeking to utilize a free space. About 120, 150K spaces are available in private schools, depending on the location. Last time I spoke to the association. So looking at spaces in private schools and listing these private schools on the computerized school placement system so that if you're in Medina, you can select a school like Action and then attend. And secondly, absorbing the students there. There are 2 things they intend to do in the private schools. We must have a fair idea about how much it will cost. Because if we estimate that about 150,000 students are in private schools and may be benefiting from the free senior high school, if they add private school students now to the free senior high school, that will increase the free senior high school budget by about another $1 billion.
How so? Because it's the same money the same rate that will be given to the private guys.
Good question. It is not possible. It is not possible. We spoke with the private schools and indicated that they can run the free senior high school the same, let's say 2,400, 2,500 series a year fees being paid by government. It's not possible.
Because they have to pay their own teachers, they have to do all of that.
Exactly. A free senior high school $3 billion a year budget excludes compensation. It excludes capex. Okay, so the private school now needs to do some maintenance. Some level of infrastructure development or payment of salaries. They have to earn salary alone is 70% of their education budget. So you can imagine the share of salary of the private schools budget. So the 2,005 or so will only suffice for providing food, teaching and learning resources, utilities, internet. We know the items that go into that. Even textbooks are not included. And so government will have to provide textbooks outside the 2,500. And the 2,500 is actually averagely what the border spends. So if we are supporting private schools to admit students to help end double track, then we are likely to spend
How about so the private schools?
more than the 2.5.
You limit yourself to your community, so it will be day. All right. So the textbook and things the students would have been given in the public schools.
Yeah.
Those same textbooks will be given to them anyway.
They will be bought. They will be bought and given to them
by the state.
Yes.
The same way.
Yes.
So maybe they will limit themselves to day school because they will serve the communities.
Yeah. You still pay the teachers. You pay the day school teachers. Yeah. You pay. So it will require some more support. I'm saying that it won't be the same amount in the public schools. It will require some more support. Some private schools may require some level of support to enhance their infrastructure. It's better than building a new school from scratch. You understand? I'm talking about economically wise. And so what I want to say is that the approach will have to be figured out. It is possible, but the approach must be figured out. And the training. You see, we have recommended that, look, let's train. If you tell me that Action Senior High School is on the computerized school placement systems, I should go and select it. I may not select it at first instance because that's Action, right? I will see, I'm in Medina, I will see Presec, I will see WAS. Okay, but if we have a training approach where Action is a campus of Presec, or Action is paired with Presec, where supervision of teaching and learning at Presec is extended to include Action. Learning culture is transmitted to Action. Other schools around the Presec area. You understand? Then they are learning the practices at Presec that has made Presec. It is not infrastructure that has made Presec. It's actually the culture.
The culture and the caliber of students who go there.
I don't want to say that because I went to Benkum Secondary School. It's more about the culture. I'll give you an example. You go to some of the schools. There are teachers who don't teach. They only supervise the work of other teachers. Supervise how they teach. Supervise how they mark scripts. They supervise teachers. If you go to the least endowed schools, they don't have that. The teacher is teaching and no one is doing that close supervision. So a lot of culture, learning culture, teaching culture, a lot of cultures exist in these schools that the previous government started a program to train them. You understand? That must be continued. And so if I am selecting a school like Action and I'm telling you, if I know that it's another campus of Presec, I'm likely to select Action. You understand? That will help to show up demand for senior high schools in these private schools. Because bear in mind that unlike public basic education, for public secondary education, the preference is for public. So that you must do, and we have a democratized school selection regime in the secondary schools. So you are only taken to a school that you select. So you must mobilize demand and make the private schools attractive. And so those are a couple of things that I call the gradualist approach. And then see the blend. What percentage of double track can be ended with completing e-blocks and other ongoing infrastructure projects in senior high schools, and what percentage of double track can be ended using existing underutilized private senior high school infrastructure and all that.
Food has become a major issue. I know you have to leave, but food has become a major issue. We saw the president recently make a directive, or give a directive that food meant for the northern sector, for the drought, etc., should be sent to the schools. How do we deal with this permanently?
Again, the same gradualist approach. There's a centralized system for procuring food. NDC has proposed to decentralize it. We support the move. We made the recommendation for years. It has been adapted. But you don't truncate that system immediately. It will cause supply disruptions. There's a system which is very, very complex. Ghana Commodity Exchange, buffer stock, providing food through their suppliers to schools. If you want to switch to the decentralized system that was operating since Kwame Nkrumah till Free Senior School started, there must be a roadmap. There must be a migration plan that is gradual so that you don't disrupt the procurement and the supply chain. And then at the same time to continue to give confidence to the existing suppliers in the existing system that the government will honor, POs. I mean, their invoices. And so once they are requested, they should supply them. Because there was a fear that when they supply, they will not be paid. That's why we had the shortages. The shortage you see was because suppliers were afraid that if they supplied food in the last quarter of last year, it's likely that when if there was a regime change, they will have challenges getting their money. So give them the assurance that we will respect your contracts so that we don't have shortages. In the interim, for example, let's say in the first year, we have to build capacity in the senior high schools. We've seen how senior high schools have, in some instances, mismanaged food. Read on the general report. There are severe procurement or contract management capacity gaps and deficits in our senior high schools. And so build capacity, put together the systems to ensure that the GES is able to now supervise procurement and stores management in our senior high schools properly. When the systems are in place, and then you gradually phase out the centralized system, and then you move to the decentralized system. It shouldn't be sudden. So we want to recommend a gradualist approach, but in the long term, it will benefit the economy, the local economy in the area. However, what we must remind the NDC is that the food issue is not a food supply issue. It's a financing issue. A free scenario feeding issue. It's not that there's no food anywhere. There's food everywhere. It's a financing issue. The suppliers delay in supplying because you owe them.
You owe them.
That's it. And so if you don't re-engineer the cash flow of the Ministry of Finance and let it meet with the cash flow of the Ministry of Education, especially specific to free senior high school, you will continue to have food shortage, even if schools are procuring. Also note that I have supplied foodstuff before to many entities, not government, to hotels and etc. You can't stretch me more than 90 days. If you lock me for 90 days, if you lock my cash flow for 90 days, I'm in trouble. You understand? Now, for bulk suppliers, you can owe them beyond 90 days because they have bigger LCs and letters of comfort and other credit instruments that they can rely on. But they are bringing perhaps ship loads or huge containers. But at the district level, you are engaging with small-scale suppliers. The extent to which they can accommodate you locking their cash and still supply you is limited. And so, if we are decentralizing to the senior high schools, we must improve the cash flow. Other than that, we will only transfer an inefficiency from the center to the periphery.
Very well. Thanks so much. Kofi Asare, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll have Honorable Foko conclude his thoughts, and then we'll deal with the matter of the privatization of the ECG. This is a big issue. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
It's time to reset yourself and everything else around you for success in the new year. Tune in to the Effective Living Series 2025 this January on Channel 1 TV and 97.3 City FM. Start your year with insightful discussions and expert tips on personal growth, health, success, and more. From the 6th of January, join Apioko and Caleb Kuda engage our guests with various expertise on the Effective Living Series for a comprehensive guide to resetting your life in 2025.
This is the Effective Living Series 2025
on Channel 1 TV and 97.3 City FM. My name is Caleb Kudas.
My name is Apioko Sarah Mashong Abe. Apioko will suffice.
Week 1 kicks off with Personal Reset. Week 2 focuses on resetting your personal economy. Week 3 is all about resetting your health. Week 4, resetting business, calibrate, remodel, and rebuild. Catch the Effective Living Series live on the City Breakfast Show on 97.3 City FM and Breakfast Daily on Channel 1 TV, Monday through Thursday. Don't miss out on transforming your life for the better every week only on Channel 1 TV and 97.3 City FM. The Effective Living Series 2025 is powered by Channel 1 TV and 97.3 City FM and is proudly sponsored by Hallmark Cafe. Hallmark Cafe, delight in every sip and bite.
Yeah, welcome back. This is the big issue, 97.3 City FM. We're just concluding the discussion on the nominations, vetting, and the matters arising. And so we will dovetail into the privatization of the ECG matter. Then we'll deal with oral, whether indeed there is a place for that body or that committee in in our democracy, in our system now, and assess the issues that have been raised against that. My guests this morning, Franklin Kojo, President Imani Africa, Kofi Asari, you just heard him, dealing with the education aspect of things. We earlier had Dr. Yao Graham, coordinator of the Third World Network, the Honorable Edem Agbana, MP for Ketu North, and the Honorable Chunibo Akodia Foko, MP for Manso Kwanta in the Ashanti region on the ticket of the MPP. So yes, Honorable Foko, you're making a point about to forcing and all of that. We also noticed that you asked a very important question on tax exemptions and how that could be converted to equity for government. Generally, will you say that the answers he provided for your question specifically were satisfactory?
Yeah, thank you. So my question basically was for the minister designate to give the assurance that he has the fortitude to be able to implement that clause in the Act. Because, I mean, we have, most often entities going for tax exemptions, but the Act allows for the states to ask for equity stake in those entities. You know, it's there, but it's not been activated. I was told it's been done once. So I wanted the minister to tell the committee and the whole nation that, given the nod, he will have the confidence to be able to activate that section of the Act. So that was all. And he was positive, and I think the whole nation has heard, and people would be watching. If he's able to put his feet on the ground and act on it, I think he'll be applauded. That's it.
I see. But now, Adam, let's get into the ECG matters. Being a social democracy and a center-of-left party, people would think generally that privatization and things should be a bit far from you, but it does appear that you are rather championing this at this time. Is privatization the only way we can resolve the difficulties of the ECG to ensure that the ECG is properly cleaned up, the ECG is delivering efficient services, the ECG is not accumulating the debt it's accumulating, is running properly? Is privatization the only way?
Well, Selorm, you asked a very interesting question and try to link it to our
to your roots,
political ideology. And so, well, privatization is not and cannot be the only way. But the stark reality is that where we find ourselves today as a country, the situation in which we are, the challenges around the energy sector, and the inefficiencies of the electricity company of Ghana, and the fact that with all the assessments done, ECG remains the weakest link in the value chain within the sector, privatization is the way to go practically at this time. Electricity Company of Ghana remains a strategic national asset. And because it is a public good, I can understand the concerns that Ghanaians are raising, the concerns of stakeholders like yourself, over attempts by the NDC government to privatize ECG. But there's a history to all of these things. Before 2016, President Mahama and the NDC government decided to apply the MCC Compact 2. And then when we exited office and the NPP came, they decided to more or less take advantage of the whole process, and they were looking out for their private interest. And that is what led us to the scandalous PDS situation. Till today, nobody has been punished for that mess. Nobody has accounted for the millions of dollars that were lost in the process of PDS taking over ECG. And so they messed up the entire system because of corruption. They were unable to see to the implementation of the MCC Compact 2, which even led to Ghana losing out on
$190 million.
$190 million. And the last time I heard from the energy minister designates, that facility is no more even available to us. We have to go back, renegotiate, and bring new ideas to the table before they will decide whether or not they will give that package to us. So where we find ourselves now, the privatization will be done. And it will be done in a very transparent manner, so that we build up the efficiency of the institution. We are in crisis. What happened, and the fact is that because we were approaching a critical elections, the previous government decided to suspend the crisis and attempted to create an impression as though all was well within the energy sector. And so a few days after elections, we can all speak to the fact that we have experienced and we keep experiencing the challenges. Now we have been exposed to the crisis situation within the sector. What we need is that we must privatize ECG at this moment, but do it in a very transparent manner without losing sight of the fact that the people of Ghana expect frequent, seamless flow and availability of power at an affordable cost to them. And that, I believe, will be done. But until the privatization is done in a transparent manner, as we are attempting to do by this government, the challenges within the sector will remain. Selorm, in 2020, government decided to implement the cash water fall mechanism. When you look at the formula for distribution, and I have had the opportunity to read extensively the audit report
of the
PwC. And when you go to chapter 4, go and read about the validation exercise and the key observations that they made, the things that they saw within the sector. Look, ECG as an institution for a while now is a crime scene. A crime scene in the sense that an institution that even with a presidential directive to maintain a centralized account, which makes it possible for easy allocation in accordance with the cash, with the CWM mechanism, they are maintaining about 84 accounts. An institution as important as ECG decides to flout presidential orders. They are not accountable to anybody, and you can even see that more than 690 million is lost in the process of accountability because nobody is accounting for the discrepancies.
So it's lack of leadership, maybe at the ECG and even at the national
lack
level.
of leadership is
so
one.
If Mahama will provide
there
that
is
leadership,
inefficiency.
yes, if Mahama will provide that leadership to the extent that somebody flouts it, is punished, I'm sure that will be resolved. So that may not answer why it has to be privatized.
Selorm, we will provide the leadership, but we are saying that, and Kofi made a very important point, that we are at a point that you have many options on your table, but you must choose what works for the Ghanaian people. Within the situation that we find ourselves in, and the comprehensive plan that we had for that MCC Compact 2, privatization is the way to go. And we believe that with the kind of leadership that we are providing, that President Mahama is providing, this privatization process, the transition process, will be so smooth that at the end of the day, the good people of Ghana would have electricity at a very affordable cost, and all the challenges within the system will be addressed. Where we find ourselves, we are in crisis. And crisis management requires that you weigh all the options that are available to you and you take the best way possible. And I think that privatization is the way to go.
So let's look at the issue. So POO, for
Yes.
example,
Yes.
POO is opposed to this kind of privatization. POO says that the issues underlying the problems at the ECG are known, and those issues can be resolved. The government really wants to resolve them. So issues of political interference in the management of the ECG, rising cost of inputs in the power sector, and the fact that the tariffs we pay do not reflect the market realities. These are problems we know. And in fact, Dr. Yao Graham earlier made some other points about ECG suffering from the general economic mismanagement. So how will privatization resolve these? And what you end up doing is also having issues with institutions like POO or associations like POO, etc., who form the workforce of these, entities. When indeed government could say, okay, because we know this as maybe government interference, we will not interfere. We will pay our debt. President can issue a directive that every agency and MMDAs should pay their electricity tariffs or electricity bills on time to enable ECG work. Because we will do so if a private entity is managing it anyway.
Yes.
So why can't we ensure
so for me,
that is done?
Selorm, that justifies even the point for the privatization.
That we can't make our own people pay, but external people will make them pay.
So it is important for leadership to carry along all the labor unions and stakeholders within the sector. We are still an infant government. As we speak, we don't even have a finance minister, we don't have an energy minister. And so what the Honorable John Jinapo is doing is to lead conversations, telling us, pointing us to the direction of the NDC government for the energy sector. And so such engagements are going on. I believe that when Honorable Jinapo and other stakeholders in government engage the stakeholders within the power sector, they will understand why privatization is the way to go. And why privatization? I think that privatization at this time brings us to three key issues. First is the issue of efficiency. We are all in agreement, and we've built a consensus that there is so much inefficiency within the power sector, especially ECG. And that is why they remain the weakest link. We all agree that privatization will increase efficiency. Yes, and you've said that even in your preamble. So if we are looking for efficiency, and it is privatization that will lead us to that part of efficiency, why are we opposed to it? Number two is capital injection. We agree that private investment can resolve some of the immediate financial constraints that ECG is confronted with. And so privatization done properly in the interest of the public, not what we saw the NPP attempt with the PDS, will lead to proper capital injection into ECG, for ECG to have the financial capacity to address these immediate constraints. And all that the people of Ghana want to see is that they want to have light on. For many of them, it doesn't even matter whether it is a private company or it is a state institution that is providing electricity. All they know is that all they want is to have their lights on.
Great.
Then the other issue is about accountability, which for me is very important. Privatization will lead to greater accountability. As we speak today, with all the issues that we are finding out within ECG, especially issues of the wastage, issues of corruption, issues of money not being accounted for, nobody is being held responsible. A couple of months ago, the managing director of ECG decided to resign, and he did that citing personal reasons. Now, Selorm, that may be the tradition in this country, but go to other advanced democracies. You cannot be at the helm of affairs of an important strategic national asset like ECG, and you resign based on personal reasons without accounting. Personal reasons, yes. So it is important. That is why when you are serving within the public space,
he will tell the appointer, he will give the appointer the reason. Maybe the reasons are not. He may give the
because the letter of resignation was addressed to the appointing authority, and it stated that I'm resigning for personal reasons. At the time where the institution was in crisis, is it that he was being pushed to sign deals?
You don't want him
so
to be
you
there.
state it because you see it is important for us to win the public trust. So when you are managing a strategic national asset and you decide to resign, you are not being put there for personal reasons. It is important for us to know who is being held accountable for all the wastage in the ECG system.
I
Who is being held as we speak today? ECG was directed to have, I mean, using the waterfall, the cash waterfall mechanism. They are supposed to be paying the independent power producers certain allocations, percentages, and we are told that even the system that ECG has is on an Excel sheet, which is so easy to edit on any computer, which makes it difficult for proper computation and accurate data to be taken. So, Selorm, looking at the challenges of the sector,
privatization is the way
I
to go.
believe that, look, when you find yourself in the middle of a challenge, in the middle of crisis demands that leaders must take the most pragmatic decision ever. I believe that regardless of whatever conversations around philosophies and whichever, whether somebody is a leftist or rightist or whatever, the people of Ghana want to see their lights on.
Very well.
And if privatization is what will do that, we will support the finance minister and the energy minister to bring in a private company or private firm to manage it.
Let me speak to Franklin, who ideologically may not be by root aligned, but on this matter, I'm sure it's very aligned. So on this matter, it does appear all my guests are aligned. But Franklin, I don't even know how to say, because I know you are a free market guy, and so the question will not be whether to privatize. You know, what can we do to make it to make this privatization better, win the public trust, ensure that we don't have a repeat of what we saw in the past, etc.
Well, actually, before I answer that question, I thought I should take a little bite on the Aruna, especially on education. Okay. I thought that was an excellent nomination, because Haruna comes to governance with a lot of experience from Parliament, but also from the various the other ministry he was at. I remember Labour. Communications, Labour and Communications. You remember, he was actually a steady pair of hands. I remember engaging him, actually working with him during the time he was communication minister. And he understood, he was just a pragmatic person. He understands exactly what ought to be done at crucial point in time. And I recall the conversations around the SIM card restriction. Don't forget, before I did this, there was a first SIM card restriction. And the conversation we had immediately changed his idea, and then he dropped that whole enterprise. Anyway, I just thought I should put that in. And I suspect that coming to this ministry, he's coming again with all the humility to listen to the various stakeholders, especially the likes of Kofi Asari and anybody else who I suspect has had a stint with the education sector and may want to see some significant changes. So good props to him, and I hope I'm sure he'll succeed. Having said that, look, anything privatization for me. By the way, we need to characterize these kinds of privatization that take place on the continent, especially in this part of our world. It's not proper privatization. You have I call it chronic capitalist privatization. I mean, all sort of arrangements are made between whoever is offloading the shares from the public sector to whoever is buying the private sector. And it's just plain thievery. I mean, chronic capitalist plunder, especially in the lives of what Ursula engaged in recently with the communication sector. She claims she's done 5G. Very corrupt arrangements where she virtually has all these cronies, downgrades the value of 5G network, yanks it off from MTN, who should have been paying close to $500 million for it, and then gives it free for some entity she claims $125 million. They've shared the thing. You don't even see the legacy. If you ask her, she says she's done her work on 5G. Do we have 5G as we speak? That kind of arrangement is a chronic capitalist arrangement, very shady arrangement. We don't want to see that in the power sector. For crying out loud, the power sector, you see, anytime I hear my good friend, Dr. Graham, I hear everybody who says, oh, the public sector will deliver. Then that they are human beings, they will definitely deliver the right set of attitudes, the right set of, should I call it, management. It never really happens. If I'm a private sector guy and I've been given opportunity to take part in the distribution of public service like electricity, and have paid significant amount of money transparently, right? Paid proper money for it. You think I'll be sitting around and then make sure that the lives of officers of even if ACG officers I'll disconnect them. I'll disconnect everybody in the public sector who owes me. That's exactly what we want to see. And you see, it's the only way we can grow. I will be ready to say that, look, a private sector entity transparently procured. That's another matter. Because you see the PDS issue, even then I blame the Americans for it as well. Because I don't think we should blame just the Ghana government for the failure of PDS. I think the American government, especially also needed to take some of the blame. And I think we made this amply clear. I think they didn't have the proper processes at all. And we blame them for it as well. So this time around, if you're going to do this, we really, really need to make sure there's a backbone. Because we cannot be repeating these mistakes and go back again. Why? We can't do that. So please, go ahead. The NDC should go ahead, make sure that this is done transparently. We'll be sure to make sure whoever is procuring must have the backing of the financial muscle. Because you see, that's another matter. And they must also know they must be given all the data. One of the reasons privatization fails in most of the world is because whenever these private companies are coming in, they're also too eager. And sometimes they don't ask for proper data. If you take the water privatization, for instance, in Tanzania, I remember Thames Water, a British company that was supposed to basically privatize water distribution in Tanzania. They didn't ask for the data for the network that was in Dar es Salaam. You understand? And because they didn't ask for that data, when they came or they started work, they realized that, we can't do this because there are all kinds of issues. Because of that, people say privatization has failed. Most of the places these things fail, sometimes the private entity is too eager. They don't probably ask proper questions. And there's all this corruption thing going on. And so it gives it a bad name. We've never really done proper privatization in this part of the world, except for maybe now we see MTN and the likes that have been privatized. I mean, the telephone, the communication sector, which has been sort of largely privatized, and we see MTN doing well. Even then, you see a minister like Asala saying, MTN, you are too successful, we won't give you 5G. Meanwhile, there are only people who can deploy 5G across the country. Then you go for some non-entities and give them some half-baked process. They said they should deploy 5G. And then someone to me yet. Those are the people who make privatization give privatization a bad name. It is not the companies like MTN who want to help make sure that at least we have quality services across the country. I mean, you understand what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. So if DWC is part of the, should I call it, Electricity Company of Ghana. Look, the ECG must really be a backbone. I spoke with Dubik. I had a full, almost half a day session with Dubik. I didn't like some of the things that went on at all. And the gentleman had every reason to get out of the place. Because at the point he said, look, the last person that I think would have my back, if he says, well, he's not interested, then I leave. Your guess as good as mine. I won't mention names, but you should understand who I'm probably referring to. The guy was the
president?
Well, of course, but who else? You see, you got me there. But you see, you understand, this guy was suffering. People were bent on procuring fuel. How do you call it? Sources. So that they can make money. How on earth do you, in a country where NDC has spent money investing in gas systems and trouble gas? We had issues with the NDC at the time, you recall. But at least they've invested in it, and now it's working. The NPP government, and my good friend Foucault is there. I've never met him before, but please, you're a financial guy. Just listen to this and ask yourself whether it makes sense for your government to have done all the things they did. You have a government that has so much stupendous amounts of energy resources. They spent the whole 8 years misbehaving, fighting potential investors simply because the investors won't budge by giving them some local fuel. What kind of thing is it? To the extent that Napo, together with Mewu and Co, actually added zilch to our energy resources. If they had done that, we have significant amount of gas already, right? we would have so much gas that we would use gas to power our supplies. And gas is cheaper. But no, now you mess up the entire system. You made any people run away. You are virtually harassing any, because they say any give money to NDC. And so because of that, the president will meet the any guy. I was shocked when the Italians were telling me this. I was like, really? Well, fine. You guys wasted that time. You didn't add any value. Acre deal, sell, and also acre crowd, $21. Messed up the entire sector. And we don't have those serious energy resources in terms of gas supply to help us get power probably cheaper. I don't want to talk about Gensa and all of those things, because I know that thing really irritates me. That arrangement irritates me to the core. But let's say that it happened, right? Now, so you do all of this stuff. You don't add significant resources, gas resources. Then you focus so much on buying liquid fuel, and then source it as well. And then disturb everybody, pile up a debt of almost $3 billion Ghana dollars as we speak. You don't even pay the other IPPs as well. This is a joke. And so the privatization system was actually in place, but it was chronic capitalist arranged. It was hijacked by the government, a few people in the NPP administration, another administration, and messed the whole thing up. So the NDC now wants to unburden this country by having this, what I call this private arrangement. I beg you, please. They should be sure, and that's the only reason, that's the only way we support them. They should make sure they put everything bare. Let's see exactly who the companies are. Let's go and look at the capacity of the companies. We don't want to hear insurance guarantee. In fact, I have the final report of that, was it arbitration or whatever it was in the UAE. And I read it, I said, what is this nonsense? You can't just deal with simple matters. By the way, it's all contrived, it's all planned to fail so that few people will just get the resources. I want to say something finally on this ECG privatization. Look, my more or less one of my board members, Tony TJC, board members Amini Imani, very sharp guy, you know him, tropical cable, interesting guy. You recall when he was board chairman of ECG, I think during John Mohammed's time. And I think he had so much hope. But even during John Mohammed's time, people were running rings around him, doing all kinds of nonsense. They just said, Charlie, I can't deal with this anymore. I went to the president and said, Mr. President, please, I'm sick. I can't do this work again. And truly, he was sick. I mean, in terms of, when he gets sick of not the
so the sickness wasn't medical or biological.
Not the dolly that we know. The sickness was, Charlie.
It's a systemic sickness.
Oh, Charlie, too much. To the extent that people were choking him. He said, hey, I can't do it. Please, you take your ball. If that is the thing that is going to repeat itself this time around, we'll definitely oppose it. And I think we have every reason. Agbana, I know you speak up when things are going wrong. Please. Jinapo himself is a friend. He knows, I think he knows his marbles. They should make sure, together with Power and the rest, make sure that, Charlie, the nonsense and the ills that we had, even from the NDC days, through all the way to the NPP days, we don't want to experience it again. It begins with protecting our significant oil resources, bring back all those contracts, all those people who were chased out of this country by the Adonoo and his cabal, bring them back, have proper conversation, negotiation. This time you'll be begging, because they have significant resources in Cote d'Ivoire. Their assets are all over the place. They don't even need you. Seriously, they don't need you. So now you have to beg them. They come back, and then you get your resources. It's the only way you can power your 24-hour economy, by giving significant, what I call concessions when it comes to power. If you don't see that nexus, my brothers, you are already out. If in 8 months you don't get this thing fixed, you're out of the next. We will throw you away in the next window.
Very well, Foucault. So you guys attempted some privatization. It just didn't go well. Upon hindsight, if you were speaking to Agbana's people on how they should go about the privatization, what will it be? And this question is on the assumption that you are for the privatization. If you are not for the privatization, let me know.
All right, thank you, Selorm. Yeah, firstly, I would say today I'm so proud of the party I belong to, which is the NPP party, because we always come out with bold solutions and we come out first. We have always taken the stance that privatization is the way for ECG. At the time when we said it, the other side, NDC, was against it. And I'm happy today they've turned around to know the truth, that privatization is the way forward. So I am proud of the party I'm part of for the bold solutions that we make and the fact that we make it the first. Very proud. So first question that we have to ask ourselves is, when it comes to the energy sector or electricity supply, what do Ghanaians want? What do Ghanaians want? I believe what Ghanaians want is electricity supply that is available, electricity supply that is not so expensive, electricity supply that gives value for money. These are what the Ghanaians want. And that is what we assessed and came to the conclusion that privatization was the way forward. But now, from the question that you asked, now we need to ask ourselves, because now there's a new government in place, and they are now going back to take the idea that the NPP put across some few years ago. So you ask yourself, firstly, the privatization as it's being put across now, firstly, what are we looking at? Is it privatizing the collections aspect of ECG, that is the revenue collection, because we haven't done so well there? Is that what is being looked at? Is it about the services or the servicing aspect of ECG that we are looking at? Or is it the distribution aspect of the energy that we are looking at? We need to be clear about these. Or is it the entire company of ECG, i.e. looking at the net asset value of ECG? That is what we are looking to privatize, or what? We need to be clear. That is point number one. We need to be clear from the onset that, look, even now, the issue of affordability comes to play. Yes, privatization, we are for, and we started it. So like I said, we are happy our friends are now coming around. As we speak now, ECG buys power at 10 cents per kilowatt hour. They sell it at 8 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a shortfall under recovery of 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So you are going to give to private hands. Questions come up. Even now, where we have under recoveries, there are complaints everywhere that tariffs are high. So entirely to private hands or partly to private hands, how do we deal with these tariffs issues? Are they going to do full recovery? If they do full recovery, what are the implications? Because even now, with under recovery, there are complaints. So we need to look at all these before we make the steps. So there are a whole lot of things we need to look at. Like I said, whether we are privatizing portions of it or we are looking at the entire company. The assets of the company, what are we going to look at? These are some of the questions that came up in the earlier one. The assets, what are we going to do with the assets? Are we going to use as equity stake in the new entity or not? And so on and so forth. So the decision to go into privatizing ECG, for NPP, it is a no-brainer. We already made this bold decision years ago. Now it's being retabled, and the key questions are the ones that I've just put across. We need to be able to take each of these to say that yes, we are sure, especially the tariffs, that if this private entity is coming in today doing full recovery, are we ready to absorb? Are Ghanaians ready to absorb the full recovery costs? And will that be value for money as we want it? So, Selorm, for NPP, we made a rightful decision. Our friends are coming around. We just need to understand now the repackaging, what is in there, what is being privatized exactly, and how is it being done? Is it value for money?
Harry Amson sent this message. Harry Amson is one of the key guys in the NDC. I mean, he was on the Agric committee and on the 24-hour thing. He said most transparent route is via the Ghana Stock Exchange. Sell majority block to a strategic private sector partner via the GSE based on an international open bidding process, 51%. Sell a block to private and corporate Ghanaian interest, 33%. GOG holds the balance. Does it look feasible?
I mean, there's so many options that we can look at. This is his view. But I would say, notwithstanding, yes, there should be some portion that should be owned by Ghanaians. Not necessarily the government, but Ghanaians. For Ghanaians to have a voice at the board, because no one will have your interest more than yourself. So there should be some Ghanaian voice, some Ghanaian eye at the table when decisions are being made. And like I said, in all this, no matter the formula or the form that it takes, at the end of the day, is value for money for Ghanaians. Is the power going to be on 24/7? Are we going to extend it to places that we don't have power? Is it going to be affordable? That is it. The rest is, people don't want to hear this. If you interviewed 9 out of 10 Ghanaians, that is what they will say. I want my power to be on. I want the tariff to be manageable. I want the power in my village. Myself, as I sit here, I have some towns in my constituency
who do not have
who do not have power. And I want them to get the power. So if I went to my constituency now, Manson Kwanta, some of these towns, there's a town called Abom, they will ask me, when are we getting the power connected? So these are the key questions. So the new entity that might come, can they answer these questions? And if these are key to Ghanaians and not only the issue of making profit, then it is imperative to say that a portion should be owned by Ghanaians, either private or whatever. A portion should be owned by Ghanaians so that our interest is protected.
Very well. A few of your messages here. This one says, the vetting was a great success despite the vicious attempt by Afenyo Markin and his MPs to disrupt the process as part of their plans to sabotage the state. The Speaker must check the unruly conduct of Afenyo Markin before he throws the House into anarchy, just as he did recently. We must not allow Afenyo to get away with his behavior since he is bent to obstruct the NDC. This one says, good morning, Channel 1 TV. I think if betting is not good and, for that matter, addictive, that corrupts the youth, then why not measures to abolish it completely? Taxing it is also a sin because the proceeds are not even used appropriately. All right. This one from Jumako Ochisu says, I think if betting is not good. Okay, so I think it's the same person who repeated the message. Chris from Ashalebutu says, early days yet, but I'm highly impressed with the foundations laid down for successful takeoff of to reset Ghana. Ghana will work again. So I'm waking up and knowing that the humble and capable folks are in charge. That alone is enough. The reset has started in your studio. Okay, Chris from Ashalebutu. A few other, okay, so Harry again comes back to say political interests may see us use a more complex process. The vetting of the private interest allows broad, open public consultation. The 33% stake will allow labor groups, firms, and private citizens to co-own ECG with GOG and the private sector person leads. All right, so let's use the rest of the time to deal with oral quickly. Martin Pebu will join us soon, but let me start with you. Edem Agbana, it's your manifesto promise you are trying to implement. The concern has been that what the oral guys are doing has no legal basis, and that Foco's people, or Foco and his team, have sent word to their colleagues who are former appointees or who are former appointees that they should not honor the invitation of oral. What's the structure? Are we going to see this oral way into the term? Has it come to stay in this form? What's the structure?
Well, in our campaign, we promised oral. But if you can give me just a minute to address one or two issues that my colleague MP raised. First one has to do with the issue of privatization. I don't think that we in the NDC are fighting for recognition as who first introduced privatization or who made the argument for it. But it is clear that it was under President Mohammed's government between 2013 and 2016 that we signed on to that particular agreement to apply the MCC Compact 2. That led to us giving the ECG to a concessionaire. Before there was a takeover by the MPP government, they decided to change it to PDS and all of that. And so this argument for privatization of ECG is not starting today. It's something that even in our previous government, we started taking steps to apply or to get onto. I think it's important. Number two is the issue of taxes. I think it's important to remind my colleague that even the NPP that introduced these taxes in their campaign promised to abolish them. You introduced e-levy, and you told the people of Ghana that it was the panacea. You introduced e-levy, the betting tax, and all these taxes that the NDC has promised to scrap. But in your own campaign, your flag bearer, who was the chairman of the economic management team, also led a campaign against these same taxes that his government introduced. And so if the NDC promised to scrap these taxes and today we are showing commitment to scrapping them, I don't think that the MPP should have any challenge with it and talk about we are trying to take our revenue sources. But you were in government, you introduced them. Why didn't you stand by your decision to introduce these taxes? And you promised to also abolish if you were given the opportunity on December 7th. And so it's important to lay these foundations before we proceed. Oral, I think that all of us generally agree that corruption is a canker that is destroying this country. We agree that our level of development is not progressing as steadily as we want to see it because of corruption. And we also agree that corruption is the reason why many people today in Ghana cannot afford 3 square meals a day. Because all the revenue that we generate, monies that come to the state, some people abuse their offices and they substitute the national interest for their personal interest. And so there is a need for us to deal with corruption. There are several ways by which the issue of corruption can be confronted. And even from 92, in this Fourth Republic, almost every government has introduced either one legislation or one bureaucracy or the other to address the issue of corruption. There was a time the introduction of the Whistleblowers Act was so popular because as a country we thought or we accepted that we needed to protect whistleblowers in order to deal with the issue of corruption. The previous government said it was the issue of prosecution that was delaying. And so they needed to set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor, an entity that, in my view, has been a complete failure. Because if you introduce a bureaucracy, you are paying people, you have employed people that you are paying them with taxpayers' money. And the reason for introducing that particular office was to facilitate prosecution. Which prosecution have they been successful at in the 8 years of President Akufo-Addo? And so that office has been a complete failure, shambolic, and nothing else. Now the NDC government promised.
The NDC says it wants oral.
We promised Operation Recover All Loot. So we are saying that to make corruption unattractive to public officials, you ought to recover all loot possible and punish people for corrupt activities. So before the swearing in, President Mahama, in order to let Ghanaians know his seriousness about the fight against corruption, decided to set up what we call the oral preparatory team. And that is the description for the team. It means that he had put in place a committee of a sort to prepare towards the official implementation of oral. So what we have there today,
it's not a real oral. It's just a preparatory team.
Now, the question is, what is the role of the preparatory team? To go on a fact-finding mission. It has provided a platform for the people of Ghana who did not have an idea how to report corrupt activities, who may not have an idea how to go about with the issue of whistleblowing properly, and have confidence in people that will come and investigate. So they should to provide.
Submit to
and
them
as we speak,
documents.
We are told that
evidence.
over 600 plus applications. And I tell you, just last week, a former Black Stars footballer, player, called me, and it was on issue of lands. His property, lands that they bought at East Legon, Nigerian Ghana, forcefully taken away from them by operatives of the previous government. And all these people were afraid of the government, so they were quiet. But with the operationalization of oral, have now gained the confidence and said, call Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa and his team to come and see what they have done. And these are lands that have been seized from them, and the state officials were building on them. Look, the impunity that happened in the last 8 years, why are they afraid of oral?
Very well.
As for the, I will come back to the minorities' position of oral.
So Martin Pebu joined us on the line. Martin Pebu is one of the members of the oral team. Martin is a colleague lawyer, he's a senior lawyer actually. And we know his advocacy and we know his exploits at the Supreme Court of Ghana. We have just a few minutes with him. We want him to quickly address the issues that the minority raised about the legal backing or the constitutionality of the oral preparatory team. People have said that the president had John Mahama had no power to do a thing like that. Martin, good morning. Welcome to the big issue. Hello, Martin. Oh. Hello, Martin. Good morning. Can you hear me? Hello, Martin. If you can hear me, the minority has said, John Darkun, your colleague as well, has said that the work you are doing lacks legal basis. What would be your response to that?
Hello, Salam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Martin.
Oh, okay, I can hear too. Yeah, so if I heard you right, you asked about the invitations,
yes,
right?
The legal backing. John Darkun, your colleague, appears to be saying that you have no legal backing and the constitutionality of it is being questioned.
Number one, let me clarify. We are not inviting suspects. We can't even invite the suspects. We are not inviting suspects. And we cannot even invite them. That's not our mandate. Our mandate is to receive complaints and petitions, information, tips, etc. from citizens. Now, when it comes to the mandate, I want to read to you the Act 720, the Whistleblowers Act. My system is gone off. Let me make the point. When it comes on, I'll put it.
Very well.
What the Whistleblowers Act says, and Selorm, you're a lawyer. I practice with you, so I know you practice, so you know it. But I must answer for Ora. The Whistleblowers Act says that if somebody sees an offense, a crime, okay, or any other impropriety, that's to cover the civil aspects of our governance as well. And the person doesn't want to go to the police directly, the person can go to that person's head of family or principal elder of the family, or go to that person's chief, or go to that person's employer. okay, or go to that person's assembly member, or go to the chief executive officer, the DC or MC. Then, of course, you can. The list also contains going to the police, go to Yoko, go to Shraj, etc., Minister of State, and even go to the office of the president. So do you remember that President Kufuor even set up an office of accountability? Selorm, do you remember that office?
I remember very well.
Excellent.
Yes.
So that is our law. So you see that ORA is not new. Kufuor set up an office of accountability and encourage citizens to report abuse of office, corruption, etc. to the office of accountability. And when we say Kufuor, President Kufuor was president between 2001 and 2008, right? And at that time that President Kufuor set up the Office of Accountability, we had IOCO, Serious Fraud Office. We had, that's a Serious Fraud Office previously. We had the police. We had Shraj. We had NIB, previously BNI, etc. So these institutions were there, and yet President Kufuor set up the Office of Accountability because under the Whistleblowers Act, Act 720, it is allowed that you can report to the Office of the President. Now, so if you bring it to this case of President Mahama, yes, and then of course the list also includes Member of Parliament. Okay, it's a long list. So President Mahama, when he won the elections, was being inundated with complaints of corruption and corruption-related offenses. And so naturally, he's one person, and you know, he had many other things to do. So he got this brilliant idea that why don't I set up a committee so that the committee can start looking at these complaints, etc. And that's what he did. And I'm saying that, so under the Whistleblowers Act, it's not always the case that you go straight to the police. If you don't feel comfortable going to the police, you feel intimidated, etc., you can go tell any of these persons that I've mentioned. Besides, Selorm, even before the Whistleblowers Act was passed, Act 720, we've always had the Criminal Offences Act. And then I'm interested in the Criminal and Other Offences Procedure Act, the Act 30. You see from sections 10 to 14, citizens are allowed to arrest, citizen arrest. So if a citizen sees a crime being committed, a citizen can report, and a citizen can even arrest and take to the police station. So what is new and different about ORA?
The concern is, Martin,
it's allowed.
Yes, the concern.
Make such arrests all the time.
Yes, the concern is that at the time John Mahama set up this committee or this team, he had no power to do so because he was just president-elect. So if you give the example about John Kufuor, etc., they were president, they had executive power, and so they could do so. So it's not about the oral as a team, which is the problem, setting it up at any time. But the time it was set up, John Mahama was only president-elect and had no executive power to be able to set up a committee. What would be the response to that, sir?
Okay, thank you, Selorm. Now, Selorm, so that's why I sought to answer with the Criminal Procedure Act, Act 30. As a citizens, you don't have to be a government officer. You don't have to be a government, a public officer, but you can assist law enforcement. So as we sit here, Selorm, all the NGOs in anti-corruption, I don't want to mention specific corruption exposés, but I can tell you on authority, and you know, that some of the big corruption exposés that were made by investigative journalists, etc., were as a result of petitions presented to these NGOs. These corruption exposés were as a result of the corruption petitions presented to these NGOs. And whilst I was on another program, Selorm, Franklin Kujo gave me a typical example. Franklin, your panel in residence. Franklin said it was a deputy minister in the Akufo-Addo administration who gave him information about the rot that was being caused by Kelly GVG. So you see how we fight corruption. A deputy minister rose to the occasion and gave Franklin the information. So what the point we are making is that the deputy minister knew that there is Yoko. The deputy minister knew that there is OSP, there is police, there is Shrad, etc. Yet the deputy minister gave the information to Franklin Kujo, a private citizen, and based on it, they did further investigation. And you know how this Kelly GVG matter is going on and it's still ongoing, how we are asking for value for money and with our money is being paid for no work done, etc. And also look at GII, Mary Adder's organization. They are an NGO. They receive petitions of corruption and corruption-related offenses. And then they help to present these petitions to OSP and other law enforcement agencies. So it's always been within our law that even private citizens can assist the police and other law enforcement agencies. Oh, I'm even remembering more NGOs. Don't NGOs come on your platforms, then they'll say, if you see anything wrong, we are helping to fight violence against women. Come and report to us. If your husband beats you, look at the hand, look at the ACT Foundation. The ACT Foundation, Dr. Angela Jamina,
yes.
The lawyer.
Yes.
ACT Foundation is an NGO. Yeah, they are doing violence against women, etc. They report when they receive their complaints. They take to the police station. ACT Foundation as a shelter. And of course, by the way, we need to support the ACT Foundation. We need to help them with funding so that they can build more shelters, so that they can protect more of our sisters. Mostly it's the women and children who get battered. I know some women also beat their husbands, but largely, typically, it's men who cause such violence to women. So let's support Dr. Angela Jamina's ACT Foundation. So Selorm, so you see it, NGOs, and we didn't start today. It's always been in our body politics.
Very well.
It's always been in our governance from the 60s. The Catholic Church. Oh, so this
so the point is that it's not new, and that even though Mahama set it up when he didn't have executive power, there can be no issue about the constitutionality of what you are doing, just collating or receiving complaints from the public. Now, people wonder, so when will this preparatory work finish, the team's work? When will it conclude?
Selorm, let me see. I think I lost you a little bit. I have to increase my volume.
Yes, I was asking.
1 second. Let me.
Yes, I was asking when the work of the preparatory team will come to an end, given that the government or Mahama is gradually putting his government together. When will this come to your work as a preparatory team? When will you come to an end? You may want to unmute. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's when the Attorney General takes office. When the Attorney General takes office. But even though I'm not speaking for the committee, I can see that, Dr. Ayene is now acting Attorney General. So I'm sure when they said when he takes office, they meant when he's fully in office.
Yes.
So what I can see, Selorm, to be practical, is that looking at where oral is in terms of the petitions, processing the tapes, information, etc. When the Attorney General is fully in office, it appears to me we may have to seek a little extension from President Mahama. It appears to me, because the work is a lot.
Very well.
It's a lot. Processing these things, categorizing them, doing checks, and some of them we have to validate their claims. You see how we went around to the great engineering services, or popularly called by some of the petitions and claims. So I can see that if Dr. Ayene is confirmed, I don't know when, but I'm saying that if it's within the next 2 weeks, it doesn't look like we can be done within 2 weeks.
Very
so
well.
we may need some extension.
Very well. Thanks so much, Martin. Martin, we'll speak again this week on some other legal matters, which we think we should bring to the knowledge and attention of our viewers and listeners. But I'll stay in touch. Thanks so much for your time this morning. We are grateful. So Martin Pebu is a private legal practitioner. He's a member of the oral preparatory team. You're just speaking to us on some matters that have arisen. Honorable Foko, your thoughts on the oral. Minority said they shouldn't. We said they've not invited anybody. So what then is your basis?
Yeah, thank you, Selorm. So I believe by now Ghanaians are aware of the position of the NPP on this so-called aura. And I have to make it clear now that it shouldn't be misconstrued as if anyone is trying to stand on the way of the so-called fight against corruption or whatever. But whatever we do as a nation run by law, as a republic, whatever we do should be grounded in the Constitution of Ghana. So this aura, what is its basis? We're wondering, and that is what we put across.
Just cited at 17.
No, I'm coming. I'm coming. So we don't see its basis in the Constitution, and at the time that even, and this has been said, not even by myself, at the time that it was set up, President Mahama, as he is now, was president-elect. So how could he have set this up? And now it's being turned around to say that it was a preparatory something. When did we hear this?
No, but that was a letter. The letter they were given.
So, I mean, the time that was set up, it was president-elect. So if you liken it to a committee that was set up by President Kufuor, the two are not the same. He was president that had been sworn in. So that the two have to be clarified. Again, this Whistleblowers Act, I mean, from Martin Pebu himself, he did mention institutions that are stated in the Act clearly as the points of contact for people that have suspicion of, wrongdoing to report to. He mentioned IOCO and so on and so forth, all these regulatory bodies mandated by the Constitution of Ghana. There's nothing likened to ORA or of any ad hoc committee or whatever. The number of institutions set up by the Constitution, and of course in this Whistleblowers Act that was mentioned by Martin Pebu himself. So where lies ORA? Really, is constitutional mandate and the executive powers based on which President Mahama or President-elect Mahama was able to set it up at the time. Now, if we are not careful, and this is dangerous, you see, what is wrong, and we must all be really objective to be able to stand and speak against it.
Very well. Great.
If it is not against you, or if it is not following you, and you think it's not following you, so it's fine, it will get to you. We've seen the ORA team going round, visiting people's lands, visiting homes. We've seen it on TV. People's land being visited and so on. If we are not careful, this could turn into a sort of a vigilante group, and you will have it across the country. Now people will become whatever shadow aura or pseudo auras and going around harassing people. And we just don't want to see this. So we have told our people, former appointees and so on and so forth, that until proven that the aura has a constitutional mandate, it is backed by the Constitution of Ghana, they have to stay away. And that is the stance of the New Patriotic Party.
You have just less than a minute to give us a final word on this. Franklin.
I also have my issues and fears with oral, but I think oral is needed right now. I mean, if anybody is called and they refuses, they should arrest the person. You see, this whole thing is not people. I'm surprised. It's just a body that is asking you, how did you buy this land at the prime area? Why did you get it at this price?
Very well.
There's a lot of going out. Oral is better.
Very well. So that's Eden's view summed up, I guess.
Just 1 minute.
Okay.
I think it was Chino Achebe who said, an old woman becomes uneasy when dry bones are mentioned.
Very well.
What is the NPP afraid of about Ora? Who will come after all those who looted the state, and they will be punished severely for that?
Great. Well, that's how we conclude this edition of the program. My name is Selorm Adonoo, head Edem Agbana, I head Honorable Foko, Franklin Kujo, Martin Kwebu, earlier I head Dr. Graham, and Kofi Asari. Have a good afternoon.
Welcome to the Wonder Space Show with Miss Natalie.
In a place you want to discover, there's so much to uncover.